This is Jocko Podcast number 168 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
Beowulf spoke. Wise sir, do not grieve. It is always better to avenge dear ones than to indulge in mourning. For every one of us living in this world means waiting for our end. Let whoever can win glory before death. When a warrior is gone, that will be his best and only bulwark. So arise, my lord, and let us immediately set forth on the trail of this troll dam. I guarantee you, she will not get away. Not to dens underground, nor upland groves, nor the ocean floor. She'll have nowhere to flee to. Endure your troubles today. Bear up and be the man I expect you to be. And there is some more Beowulf to start this podcast. And it's an interesting note that Beowulf, the poem, started not as a written poem, but a poem passed on as a story from generation to generation of the pagan Anglo-Saxon warrior people. It was part of their oral history and their oral tradition. And that's basically what we're doing here. Capturing stories from our modern day warrior people, which we are continuing with today during part 2 of my brother Jason Gardner. Part 1 was the last podcast, number 167. So if you haven't listened to that one, just stop listening to this one right now. Go back and listen to 167. And then when you get done with that, you can come back and hear the rest of it. And if you have listened to 167, well, then here we go. We're going to start kind of where we left off. What's up, Jason?
Not much. Happy to be here.
Check. So we left off yesterday. You had basically... You'd stayed at Team 3. You were going to do an task unit ops tour, but then you made senior chief. Mm-hmm. And then that's where we left off. So you get done with that, and where'd you go? SEAL Team 7?
Went over to the Senior Enlisted Academy and knocked that out because that is basically a prerequisite for making E9, but it's difficult to get away from NSW for that long.
How long is that course?
That one was 6 weeks.
Yeah.
There's 2 of them. There's another one that's 3 months, and it's just... trying to cram that in it is difficult. So it made sense to go then, and then they popped me over for a troop senior enlisted advisor over at SEAL Team 7.
And so for people that don't know what that means, you're going into a task unit. Your task, did you guys have a 2-platoon task unit, or was it 3?
We did. It was 2.
Check. And that means... Explain your position of senior enlisted advisor in a SEAL task unit.
So there are 2 SEAL platoons, which are the 2 maneuver elements. And then over the top of the SEAL platoons, there's myself. I was a senior chief at the time. And then there was a lieutenant commander at the time who was the task unit commander. It was the same position that you had in TU Bruiser.
Yep. And then you were the senior enlisted guy in there. And I was actually looking at one of my old briefs, leadership briefs from the teams. And I don't know if you remember this, because I don't do it when I do it for civilians now, but I used to do the roles and responsibilities of everyone inside the task unit and be like, okay, this is what the task unit commanders should be doing. This is what the senior enlisted guy should be doing. And a key word there is, this is what a platoon chief should be doing. And this is what a platoon commander should be doing. One of the key words there is should be, because there's a lot of leeway depending on personalities and what skill sets people have. And sometimes people are capable of doing a part of someone else's job, but they're maybe not so great at doing something they should be doing. So you got to figure that out inside of a platoon. Now, I used to say that when you take a platoon, you've got to get to, like, you could pick a number. Like, you've got to get to a level 10 with the top 4 leadership, meaning the LPO, the assistant platoon commander, the platoon commander, and the platoon chief. Those, they have to have a number equal to 10. Like, you can't have a bunch of guys that are 1s because that's only a 4. Mm-hmm. But if you have a chief that's an 8, well, then cool. It's like, doesn't really matter that the platoon commander's not that great or the platoon commander's a 1 or whatever. And that's fine. sometimes you're going to get some guys that are really good at something. Sometimes there's people that aren't. And as long as you have some good leadership in there, you'll be all right. And that's what I realized when I was running Trade It. You just basically need one leader, one person that knows how to lead things, and everything will be fine. But you actually should have two people that know how to lead things, so that way if something happens to the number one guy, and then they can kind of communicate and they can talk to each other and they can bounce stuff off, and they'll just be like infinitely better. But yeah, it's always a little bit different in every task unit. And
well, that was great, because that roles and responsibilities brief that you gave, like at the time, the TU task unit leadership going through the unit level training was new. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a new position all the way together, so it wasn't really well defined. And I was really like, where the hell is my role here? So that was really helpful. And I think what you and your troop SCA did is you kind of define, because you guys participated in training, and not all the troop commanders and troop SCAs were going out to every ULT block.
Yeah, for sure.
And then now you guys did everything, and then after that
was the standard.
Everybody set that standard, and it's a good standard to have.
Yeah, and I was lucky because my first deployment to Iraq, I had a task unit commander and a task unit SEA, and we both are friends with both those guys. Mm-hmm. And they really, like, I was watching what they were doing, going, okay, that seems to work pretty well. Just looking at how they interacted with me, and they set a good example, and I kind of just took that when I came back, and that's the position I put myself into, was kind of mimicking what those two guys had done. And they were really well balanced, not micro, and they're just good, just really good leaders, Mm-hmm. And so I just, okay, that was cool, that worked. And so that's what I did. And then luckily I got to go through workup and then go to Ramadi, so I kind of knew how it, I carved that out, and there it was. Mm-hmm. And then I wrote the roles and responsibilities, because believe me, when I first took over Trade-At, there would be all kinds of waylay things going on with guys not having any idea what they should and should not be doing. Because everyone was just going, well, what should I do? Like you said, it was a new position, a relatively new position. I mean, we had task unit commanders back in the day, but they would be completely detached, and then they'd show up, hey, I'm an 03 or I'm an 04, I'm in charge of you, and everyone would be like, okay, that sounds cool, whatever. Who's this guy?
Yeah, and you wouldn't see him till deployment.
Yeah.
And then now the new thing was you're like there from day one, which was really cool how we evolved that way.
Yeah, no, and it's as it should be. So you get there and form up your platoons and start going through training.
Yeah, we start doing workup, and so the task unit commander, he had a lot of experience. All the platoon leadership had a lot of experience too. So it was I would say it was stacked. We had great all the way down to like some of our E5s had deployments to Iraq. They had good experience, so it looked like, hey, everything's going to be easy. And then we started ULT, went out to the land warfare block, which has really always been where I have a soft spot in my heart, because it's hard, it's dirty, and it's mean. But we train out there in the desert. We'd gone through the first 2 weeks of the land warfare block, which is doing our immediate action drills, a lot of our range work, our demo, all that stuff. And then we were coming into the phase the last week, which is the field final training exercises. And so we're in this big classroom, and we're getting the brief on, a feedback on the brief that we'd just given for our first operation. And after that, your land warfare senior enlisted advisor came in, and he's like, hey, everybody listen up. Every task unit that's come through here before you guys has had a blue on blue during this training, so you need to be really aware of your blue force picture. And so I'm rolling my eyes, and my internal dialogue is, I'm like, oh my gosh, what a bunch of clowns. Are you kidding me? Everybody shot each other? That is never going to happen to us. I'm like, heck, I used to run land warfare training when I was at a training cell at a team, and this just isn't that hard. There's no way we're going to shoot each other. Okay, let's just go 4 hours later. It is just mass pandemonium. We went in, we hit a target, things kind of were going really smooth, and then all of a sudden everything fell apart. We had like I think we had 7 down guys that we were tracking. And then, but that we couldn't even get clear word because everybody was talking on the radio at the same time. We were trying to break off the target. There was no organization. There were guys all over the high ground around us. I remember real specifically one of the fire teams pointing up to a mountain that was just to our left saying, hey, do we have friendlies up there? And someone else saying, no, we don't have anybody, and looking at a battle map, no, we don't have anybody up there. And then that fire team wiped out what was our sniper element. So we had a whole fire team just wipe out, our 4-man sniper element trying to come down high ground with a down man of their own. And then so we made it to the extract, dragging all our bodies out of order, everybody talking, get back to the camp, realize we're missing a piece of sensitive equipment. And then in the debrief, we discovered that we'd had this heinous blue on blue, and, a fire team had pretty much wiped out another fire team. And we're just like, oh man. So we pushed guys back out to the field to find the gear that we'd lost, and thank goodness they found it before we had to stop training to find that gear. And then, we did, by no fault of my own, we did a really healthy assessment of what you guys as the training attachment had put us through, and instead of going, whoa, blaming you guys or making excuses, we're like, okay, let's make a list. And we knocked out like 4 things that we messed up, the worst 4 things that we messed up, and then how we were going to fix them. Like, okay, well, this down man thing, we don't have it right. We'd better start carrying stretchers in the field. And then we're going to stick, each fire team is going to have a parabag. So when a guy gets killed, we're taking all the sensitive stuff off of him so we can move him easy. We put him in the parabag so we don't lose it. Okay, that's done. All right, guys, everyone's got to stop talking on the radio at the same time. We got to get some comms disciplines. We ran some drills. We ran drills on how we were going to get head counts. And, then we did the drills on how are we going to identify each other in the dark as soon as there are bullets without, with no comms. And so we laid that out, and like, hey, everybody, here's where, we carry the VS-17 panel. Mm-hmm. It's like, everyone's going to have that in your left shoulder pocket, the little 3-foot ones down. So that's during daytime. At nighttime, we're going to use our strobes. And, they're at the time, and even today, I'll tell you what, if I was going out today and I was worried about the enemy having night vision, I would be more worried about, and this is me personally, and I don't want to argue this with anybody, and you can hit me up, about my own guys shooting me because they can shoot and they have big guns, than the enemy seeing my strobe.
Yeah.
So that was something that panned out later. So we did that. I thought we did it in a real healthy way. We were really cutting corners with our rehearsals because we don't get graded on our rehearsals. We get graded on our brief. So all the effort goes into the brief, but the brief doesn't stick with you mentally until you go out and rehearse it. And so we're like, hey, here's the way we're going to do our, our head counts. And we would do head counts by fire team. Someone would say head count, and then fire team 6 is up, 5's up, 4's up, 3's up, 2's up, 1's up. Like, okay, we go out, rehearse it. And we get to fire team 3 and the guy would be spacing it. And we're like, hey, fire team 3. And okay. And we get to the point where that was just second nature. And then to the point where everybody, because we got decentralized command going on now, when we're moving off target, fire team 6 knows a head count is coming, and they just kick it off and it just rolls through, and there's no issues. So we got that done. We did our next FTX. We did considerably better, but you guys ramped up the pressure, and then we had other issues. And we're like, okay, hey, when we get all mixed up, we got to be able to reorganize without sounding like a high school cafeteria. So then I think the next thing we punched into was our reorg perimeters in the dark, and we would go out and just mix everybody up and go, boom. Someone would pass us the hand signal for perimeter, and then we would go get it and get reorged and hit it up like that. And what I really enjoyed about the training, and I told people who came through it later, was that it was super challenging, and it was like going to a haunted house, and like I enjoy going to haunted houses because I like to go through and something startles me, and I'm not really happy that something like a guy popping out with a chainsaw or whatever startles me, and so I'll go through it, then I'll assess how I reacted, and I'll go next time let's do something new. But it's completely new and unexpected, and you guys continued to turn that dial up of completely new and unexpected. And that panned out to work out so well for us because we had the right attitude about it. And later on, when I moved in that position, we can talk about that later, I could see a healthy way to deal with that and the not healthy way to deal with it. And the healthy way is always owning it and taking responsibility. Yeah. And then it was so much fun. We'd be done. We'd be covered in sweat. Everybody was yelling. And it was a great experience. And then we took that and then the other blocks of training and the most intense for leadership is definitely land warfare and then SAUC, which is our urban training. And we just got hammered there too. And then it's paintball and a bunch of other stuff. But that was great. One other thing, like when you did your roles and responsibilities, you didn't really define a position for the troop senior enlisted advisor because in that, you're like, hey, you're not really going to be the assault lead or anything else like that. Because honestly, like you've said,
the thing
Thor could run an assault.
Yeah, the thing I used to say is the senior enlisted advisor is the action arm for the task unit commander. So there's going to be things that are going to need to be made happen. And that's the guy that's going to make it happen. So, we got a building that's got a problem, or we got a position that needs support, or we got a wounded guy. Like in the Army and the Marine Corps, their SOP is who runs a CASEVAC. It's the senior enlisted guy, because that's the guy that goes, he has the experience to make this happen under a massively stressful situation. So my word to the senior enlisted guys was like, you're the action arm. The task unit commander can't make things happen. He's got to look at what else is going on. He's got to figure out what the next step is going to be. He's getting information. He's passing information. All that stuff is going. He can't take time to go clear an extra building or set up a security perimeter on this ridge top. Like, you can't do that. That's the senior enlisted guy that goes, hey, boss. And obviously he's saying, hey, boss, if you want to get out of here, here's what I'm going to make happen. I'm going to go set a perimeter over here. I'm going to put gunners up on that high ground, and then you guys can peel through here, and that's where we'll leave. And the TU commander goes, awesome, yes, execute. So that to me has always been the best way to utilize the senior enlisted, because if you put the senior enlisted actually in charge of something, well, guess what they're doing? They're doing that thing. And then when something else goes sideways, who's going to handle that now? And it always seems to happen in a seam. Yeah, so it's going to be the most complicated thing too, right? The thing that's hard to handle is the thing that you didn't plan for. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't have, it's just like you don't want to commit your reserves, right? You don't want to commit your reserves in a situation where you don't have to. Well, you don't want to. You're as a TU commander, you have one guy as like the reserve. You have reserve brain power, and your reserve brain power is your SEA, because if something goes wrong, you can't get on it, but you need the most experienced, tactically savvy guy to go and handle whatever it is, which you may not even know how to handle, but you just know that you've got, enemy approaching on a road from the north. You're getting intel. You're getting fed information. Hey, there's enemy approaching on the road from the north. Hey, senior, get it taken care of. And then senior goes, I got it, and goes and handles it. And that's basically how we executed. And what's really interesting is that over comms, and guys comms would be up, and a lot of times comms go down. But over comms, the word would be like, hey, we're leaving, break down your security. And then you're waiting for a call and waiting for a call and waiting for a call. And then I'd have to run over there and say it. Looking at someone, actually say it, and then they're like, oh. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, they're hearing it.
in their headset, and it ain't happening. And you just gotta go. Guys get jammed up, and that hourglass is just turning and turning and turning, and you gotta go, hit them to get things moving, get that processor moving and going again. And then sometimes just your presence there, and talking about yelling, you're not yelling at them, but like, hey, boom, get the 60 gunner down, let's go.
Yep.
We're moving this way. Hey, get that wounded man over there, ditch the stretcher, we're done, go. And then hustling everybody up and just trying to keep everything moving around. And I'll say this now, everything that we faced in combat was easier than the stuff we faced in training, because you'd put the screws on us so hard that we were like, oh, okay, we've seen something pretty dang close to this before. So when a guy stepped on an IED and lost his legs, that we didn't experience in training, but everybody dealt with it in a professional way. And of course, that was a horrible situation, but that was not something that we were new to. We were like, oh, okay, we've done a down man. We've had this situation. We had a couple of guys get pretty severely wounded, and it was a factor in their pain, but it was no factor in how we fought and how we dealt with the situation. There were a couple times that we came ludicrously close to blue on blues, but because you'd reinforced everything in training, because we'd mitigated those blue on blues bloodlessly in training, we didn't have them on the battlefield.
Yeah. Well, it was, for me coming into that role, coming home, I was pretty emotionally connected to the fact that I wanted you guys to be ready. And just, like the whole down man thing, like it's not easy to carry a down man, especially not easy when the guy helps you and it's in training and he kind of jumps up on your shoulder and puts his hand in that right spot on your back to stabilize himself, and all those little things that they do to help each other out. It's not that easy. It sucks. And the blue on blue thing, and I remember a task unit, your task unit included, would have a blue on blue, and I'd bring them into the office, and everyone in the chain of command would sign like a safety violation.
Yep.
And I would tell everyone, I'd say, listen, I'm not doing this degrading you, because the person in this room that's had a real blue on blue where people got killed is me. And the one thing I don't want is for it to happen to you. So there's so much driving me just to try and make it as realistic as possible. And then, you get the kick-ass team guys that are running all the training. Man, once you give those guys the direction, they're just going to go. And that's just, so I'd show up for the training sites and the guys would be so amped to make the training awesome. And the amount of effort that guys would put in to make the training realistic was crazy. Some of those out at land warfare, some of the demolitions that would get set up, they would take them 3-4 days. They'd stay out on a site for 3 or 4 days, setting demo up everywhere. So there's stuff blowing up and catching on fire and just smoke everywhere. Total mayhem. And this is the thing, when you're training, there's only so much you can do to simulate combat, because what you can't do, there's a line that you cannot cross. You can't shoot people. You can't do it. You can't wound your men in training. And so that line can never get crossed. And so what can you do to get it as close to that line as possible? And the laser system that we had and the explosives, and then just unleashing all that chaos and mayhem. And I was lucky that I got to experience that on the battlefield and come home and be like, bro. And you mentioned it quickly, like your attitude towards it, but your attitude towards it is what the winning task unit attitude always was. Because it's real easy to go, that was bullshit. You had a bunch of guys set up on that hill. Like, yeah, you don't think Al-Qaeda is going to set people up on a hill? You don't think the Mujahid is going to set people in a spider hole in the middle of a compound? You don't think, by the way, all that stuff, we got it from actual after actions reports. So the fact that you and your task unit, instead of looking at everyone else as to why you didn't do a good job, you looked at yourselves and said, okay, what can we actually do better? How about we actually try and improve some things? How about we pick 3-4 things and we try and do those things better? And then you do those things better. And you're right. And you know this from working and training, you already know what's going to happen. Like, you can see, you put a guy here, you put a bad guy over here, you put a bad guy over there, you've got a terrain feature like this, you know what's going to happen. And you watch it unfold. And then you also know that if the leadership can make some good calls, it's going to be no factor. If the platoons have good standard operating procedures, it'll be no factor. But if they're not, and the leadership starts to fall apart, I mean, everything falls apart. And that thing you just said about the fire team, I used to tell the task unit commanders this. I used to say, imagine you got your fire teams out there. Imagine if each one of your fire teams was doing something good that was moving you in the direction that you wanted them to move. Just imagine if that happened. And what happens when that occurs is the leader doesn't actually have to say barely anything other than, we're getting out of here. Mm-hmm. And as soon as we're heading south, we're getting out of here, going to our old rally point. As soon as everyone knows that, they just make it happen. And TU commander can do whatever he wants to do, because the fire team leaders are going to make things happen themselves. And the opposite of that is, there's no possible way you can control these people if you have to tell them everything that you want them to do. Mm-hmm. You can't say, hey, you can't talk to all those people at the same time. You can't know what the best vantage point for the 60 gunner is going to be on that little knoll. You can't do it. That guy has to understand what it is that is wanted from him and why it's important for him to do it. And then once he knows that, boom, he makes it happen. Yeah.
And then, I think it was my TU commander that you're talking about when you said that initially you weren't sure if quiet guys could lead, because he's not a loud guy. Like, I'm a loud guy.
Yeah.
His personality is different. He's not super loud, but he was direct, clear, and concise, and he did a fantastic. I really enjoyed working with him.
Yeah, and he's a good example of that. I mean, he's not the guy specifically I'm talking about, but he's a guy that was, especially like the little things you were just barking out. Put a 60 over there. Put that stretcher away. We're leaving it. Get that wounded man. Those things, if you're not loud, they just don't get heard.
Yep.
And so with your task unit commander, I noticed that. And was kind of like, hey man, you need to get louder. And what he did was this, hey, who's pretty loud? My stupid SEA standing over there, all those little tattoos on his arm. He might not be the smartest dude in the world, but he's loud. And when he tells you, hey, tell him to put that stretcher away, or whatever, then you or whoever in your task unit starts barking out the orders, and it happens, And so yeah, he did a great job of that. And had the same attitude as you, because he was experienced. That was another cool thing. I'd get guys that were coming through training more experienced than me, and the good SEAL leaders would come through that training and be like, "Oh, that was awesome, man. Yeah, hey, you just kicked our ass. Thank you. We're gonna try and do better. What did you see?" Like, they would just want feedback, just want suggestions, and then you'd get other guys coming through that it was everyone else's fault. And the training wasn't real. It's not realistic to get hit from 3 sides. Really? Why is that? Where do you see that in the Geneva Convention, that you're not allowed to ambush from 3 sides? And that attitude never turned out well. It just never. It's 0% of turning out well. Of, hey, the training is unrealistic. The training is this. The training is that. Like, no, actually, just do the SOPs. Step up and lead. And everything works. And that was the other amazing thing, is you'd see the same problems, and once a task unit got good, you couldn't even stop them, because it's 40 guys against 4 or 5. As you know, the training guys it's like 4 or 5 guys out there shooting them up. So,
yeah, I mean, you, when you're running those scenarios, you can't bring your guys back to life, which you can remotely do, fast enough to apply a decent amount of pressure to when that troop is just gotten up on step.
Yep.
And then everybody is so happy.
Yeah. You can't. You're right. You can't reset people. You can't reset the OPFOR quick enough because when you get a SEAL troop that's just in straight aggressive murder mode and going hard, every little thing they see, they're assaulting. It's awesome. It's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah.
So now, were you guys planning to go to Afghanistan during that workup? I don't think you were you?
We were slated to go to Basra. And so we were going to be going down to southern Iraq and working out of there. And then the request for forces popped up that they were asking for a SEAL troop back in Afghanistan. And I think on the numbered SEAL teams had been out of Afghanistan since somewhere around 2005. So there had been no presence whatsoever for numbered SEAL teams in Afghanistan in a while. Mm-hmm. This is 2009. So initially there was it popped up, and then it was confirmed, and then like over the Christmas holiday, they said, okay, hey, we're going to send my troop is going to be the troop to Afghanistan. What that looked like, no one knew. So you're going to Afghanistan because there's a deployment order that has to get signed to go anywhere. That's got to be signed by the Secretary of Defense, right? And ours to deploy a SEAL troop to Afghanistan was in the book. It hadn't been signed yet. And so myself, the task unit commander, and one of the OICs who deployed with you, we did a pre-deployment site survey, and I think it was like in February we went. And usually on a pre-deployment site survey or pre-PDSS, you go over, you see what's going on, then you come back. We went over there, and I stayed. Me and a CB chief came with me, who was going to set up our berthing and stuff, was one of our support, or all four of us went, and then he and I never came back from that pre-deployment site survey. We just stayed there. So so going into, in an awkward situation where we're going over there, they were working for the Army, SF, and they don't even know what they're going to do with us. A lot of them didn't want us because they'd had bad experiences, unfortunately, with SEALs before. And so what I did, and I kind of tore a page out of your book. I didn't know this is what you guys did, but this is what I did. Is I usually wear my hair like this. I went ahead and got high and tight to shift over to look a little bit more like the Army does, because it's just another way to establish rapport, and I don't care about my hair. I just don't. And so when we got there, the first place we went was to the Siege of Sodif, which is the 06 that's running everything there. And I went into the Sergeant Major's office, was a senior enlisted advisor. I went in his office and stood I introduced myself and stood at parade rest. And he looked up from his desk and stared at me. And I'm in, I got a clean uniform on. I got a high and tight. And he goes, I have never seen a SEAL like you before. And I kept it real professional with him. And then he's like, hey, we don't know where we're going to put you. We don't know what we're going to do with you guys. We're working through that. You guys have got to go ahead and brief the colonel at the time. So we worked up a brief for the colonel, and my task unit commander went in and had a meeting with him. And he's a pretty fired up type of guy. And he asked the TU commander, like, hey, what do you need? What do you need from me? And the boss told him, hey, we need the SecDef to sign our line item to get us to deploy here. And a week later, that happened.
Legit.
And it's in order where the SecDef is supposed to sign stuff, and ours was like 9th back, and he went straight to our line item and signed it. So that colonel, we made a good impression on him. He had some pull, obviously, and made an impression moving forward. So then we were looking at, well, okay, where are we going to go? We still didn't know where we were going to go. And we talked to we had a briefing with the general, and he explained, hey, I don't have enough partner forces for all of my, SF ODA teams that are here, because normally we're working by, with, and through. And he goes, so you guys are going to go on whatever con op is hot and plus up my ODAs. You are going to attrite the Taliban and deny them freedom of movement. And I thought, hallelujah.
Yeah, it doesn't get any better than that.
It doesn't. And then we moved down to Camp Brown, and third group was running the Special Operations Task Force West down there. And we got there, and I met with the senior enlisted advisor there, and he's like, hey, we don't know where we're going to put you guys. We don't have any space for you here. And we just stayed good, and we established a relationship with him and the commander there and the XO and the ops guys. And then 2 days later, the sergeant major takes me out and he's like, hey, you see this big tent? They had this big tent right inside the gate. And he goes, this is where we were doing all our vehicle maintenance. And he goes, we're getting ready to move those guys over to another yard. You guys can have this. And so that was awesome. We were basically like, initially we were the unwanted, in-laws showing up for Christmas, like Randy Quaid and Christmas Story. And then now we were like, hey, old college buddies that had come into town. And third group was just so good to us. There was absolutely no parochialism whatsoever. And that was just a great experience working with them across the board.
So when did you start putting together, how did you say, okay, this is what we're going to do? How'd that come about? When
they just told us. There's like, we laid out, here's our capabilities, and there's like, well, here's how we'd like to use you. And we said, roger that. Where can we help? We never came in and said, hey, this is what we do, and we come in and do this X, Y, and Z, because their targeting and their whole philosophy was completely different than what they did in Iraq. In Iraq, we were very personality based, and NSW as a whole, we were reduced to personality based targeting. They're more about disruption. They'd be like, hey, Taliban's over here in freedom of movement. We're going to go do stuff over there, and then they're going to have to come fight us, and then it's going to slow them down, everywhere they're going. Or hey, they're funding this war with opium. So are we going to burn down opium fields and punish the farmer, or do we wait till the Taliban collects the opium up into one spot and then go destroy it? And that's the kind of stuff that we would do. We would go to the opium caches after the poor farmer, who doesn't have a choice about what he's growing, is harvested, that they moved it to one spot, and then we pop in, destroy all their opium, stay there for a couple days and fight them, and then leave. So that was good. But our attitude was like, how can we help? Where can we help you? And they just gave us work, and it was great.
And you guys had some pretty crazy ops.
Yeah, I would say like, so the first op, we had the Advon crew that was there, and we went out with 3116 and their commandos, and they had an op where they went in and took a bazaar, which is like a strip mall, basically, where they were facilitating a bunch of opium. Went in, held that, destroyed all the opium for a day, and then fought everybody that came at us. So we went out on that operation with them, and it was good. It was a lot of fun, and then that got them used to us and what we brought to the table. And that was an op that was setting up in a concept of operations called Siege Engine. And that was like, I think the first frag order under it. And they would do a concept operation like, hey, here's what we want to do with this stuff. And this Siege Engine was basically hammering the opium in the Helmand River Valley. And it culminated with the last frag order, and was when we went into Helmand into Marja, which is like at the heart of the Taliban. It was a Taliban-controlled town. Coalition forces had never been inside of it. In a year later, it was 2010 or 11, the Marines went in there and cleared it, and it was a huge firefight. Prior to us going in there with this operation, and it was, when I say we, It was us, the Afghan commandos, an SF ODA, and the OAB above them. I think that's OAB, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. So that detachment above them, and we just plussed them up. And their OAB commander was equal rank to our task unit commander rank, but like my boss was just like, he didn't push back. He was like, hey, what do you need me to do? And that OAB commander really appreciated that relationship, that he didn't have to, bump heads.
Big ego battle over, well, I want to be in this position.
Exactly, or I want to make this call. So coalition forces had never been inside of Marja. They tried to go close to us and just gotten shot out. We choppered into a bazaar, which was, we took the corner of 4 blocks and a pretty huge area where there was a ridiculous amount of opium consolidated. They were refining opium into heroin and making IED, improvised explosive devices, all kinds of stuff there in the middle of their town. We went in there at night. We stayed there for 4 days and just got after it wholesale. I think there was 8,000 pounds of opium that we destroyed. And it was a big operation. There was the DEA was involved. There were FBI agents there. It was a huge crew, and it was good to go. And some of the lessons learned from there is that's okay. So like the first day, I was in one of the blocking positions there, and we were taking fire basically from the east into the south, because the way the different positions, it was kind of like a cross, the way it crossed out. So when we were taking fire from the south, you had to be aware that like, hey, I can't see them, but my bullets can see them, and that way there's a bunch of guys. And so we took fire from a tree line that was probably 50 yards from the compound that we were holding. And I was up on a rooftop with another guy, and I saw like 4 guys walking around in camis, and we were getting ready to light them up, but they were wearing the stuff the commandos were wearing. Like, hey, we got guys moving down here. We need a head count. Who's got the Afghani commandos? Because these guys look just like them. And then they came back with, oh, hey, we got everybody. No one's outside of our position. And then so we were getting ready. I'm like, don't shoot. And then we called again. They confirmed again, no one's outside our position. Then finally, 20 minutes later, they're like, oh, wait, we had some guys walk out to go to, I don't know what they're doing, if they're going to the bathroom or what they were screwing around doing, but we could have just completely lit them up.
Yeah.
We used a lot of 50 cal on that. We had the air support. We had everything from Hueys to B-1 bombers overhead all day long. Bombs were falling. The Taliban was absolutely furious that we'd come into this stronghold of theirs, captured this much, all the opium. I think there was somewhere like 800 pounds of refined heroin, and the heroin was like packaged in these bags that were like this big, and they had like a scorpion on it, and it said like 2008 it had like a label,
little marketing branding,
like made here in Afghanistan or whatever. And so it was a huge affront to them that we were there. So after like the first 2 days, we basically killed off every local fighter, and then they started bringing guys up from Pakistan, and then it got kind of lively because the local fighters knew every piece of dead space, but the guys from Pakistan weren't really familiar with the area, so they would be bumbling in the open, looking the other direction, like, oh, ha-ha, ba-bum, bum, get them. I think the third morning, we got up and there's no fighting. We're like, well, when's it gonna? Because it's just like you get to setting your watch by, you're like, okay, sun's up, and we should start getting some shooting by now. And there's nothing. And so we radioed up to the headquarters. We're like, hey, what is going on? Did they quit? And they're just laughing hysterically on the radio. And they were able to tell this, and I can't describe to you how, but the guy who had the keys to the armory where they were storing all their weapons. They couldn't find him, probably because we bombed him over the night, and they couldn't get into the armory to get their stuff to come attack us.
Boy, that new guy's going to get a beat down, isn't he?
Yeah. But it was just an audacious operation that worked out great. And then
did you guys take any casualties during that time? Or did the Afghans or did the Army?
Yeah. So we had a rocket hit the compound over next to mine, and our dog handler and one of our corpsmen got fragged. The corpsman, the frag knocked a tooth out and then stuck in his tongue. So he's real lucky that his tooth slowed down the momentum. And then the dog handler got hit in the back. There were several of the Army guys that got straight up shot. And then here's the awesome part. Like I feel like their call sign was Pedro, but it was Air Force Medevac. And as soon as they heard that we were troops in contact, they lifted up and they would just be loitering real close to the firefight. Mm-hmm. And then like as soon as that missed report came over and like, hey, we got a guy down, they came in. And it would be like, I would be watching going, we're going to get that helicopter shot down. And they would just come in. They had a mini, the door gunner had a minigun. And they would just land right like on top of the guy in the middle of the firefight. We don't care. And like, I was so proud. I could just be crying because it's such an awesome thing to see, because it's complete disregard for their own personal safety, and they're just waiting to jump in there and get guys. So luckily, on that operation, no one was lost, and then the guys that were shot were all recovered from their wounds.
And what kind of damage did you guys do to the enemy? Significant.
I think it was pretty significant. I mean, there was just a huge amount of drugs and their equipment and things that we destroyed, and then it just had to hurt them psychologically that they thought they had complete freedom of movement, and then all of a sudden we came in and stayed there and just did the meat stomp on them for 4 days.
And you guys weren't only doing urban situations, you guys were going into other scenarios where you're like digging in on hillsides and whatnot too, right? Right.
So later on, that saying, take the high ground or it will take you, because all of our operations, I think we did 23 total operations on that thing. Most of them were multi-day. And so there were only 2 that we were in and out in the same cycle of darkness. And typically, we would do terrain studies, and we're like, hey, we got to defend these positions. And so when we had a compound that we're like, here's the compound, this is the compound that we're going to take and hold, where's the high ground around it? And then we need to get elements up on that high ground as well. There were 2 like time sensitive targets where we came in as a quick reaction force, where other elements, where there's another coalition SOF element and SF element that got assaulted in a valley, and they had to strong point a building because they'd been hit in this valley. And then we came in on the high ground during the night, and then the next morning, because most times the Taliban didn't fight at night because we had the advantage. The next morning when the Taliban assaulted them, we were on the high ground behind them and laid the hammer down, and then were able to get stuff to where those guys were able to get out that day. So we were taking high ground positions quite, when it made sense. There's one operation we were on where there really wasn't any high ground, and so there were like the furthest we could clear away from the compound that we were holding was 30 yards. And then it was a dense like green zone and a wall. People could completely creep up. So we had guys go, we identified that. We're like, okay, what are we going to do? And then someone's like, hey, let's go put pop flares out there, And so, that's like going back to Vietnam stuff. But guys went out and placed those, and then boom, Once the bullets started flying and we were the troops in contact, the tick, as we say in the vernacular, started to really get up to speed, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, those pop flares are going off. Okay, start pumping 40 mic over there or whatever, and yeah, it was cool. There's one of the stories we have back in Marja. The guys brought the ALGL, which is like this 40 millimeter chain gun. And then it has the new one has like a computer mount that goes on the top. And so you look at the screen and then you put the little cursor on what your target is, okay? And then it lasers it and then gives you an elevation correction based on the ballistics for the 40 millimeter. And then you raise it up, you depress the lever, dunk, 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 and then just boop, 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 boop. So there was guys in a tree line that were shooting at our guys, and they had set this thing up, and basically it's a 40 millimeter sniper rifle. And they had the like a Predator was overhead watching, giving them feedback on the fire. So they shoot at these guys in this tree line. And then they ask the Predator for a battle damage assessment. And the Predator comes back with 2 EKIA, which enemy killed in action. 1 ran away on fire.
Oh, that's good. And what about, I know you told me a story one time about you guys weren't in the high ground. There was somebody like across the valley that had a little elevation on you, and you guys were digging in, sandbag as much as you could. Yeah.
So there was one of the operations we were in, Sawali Cot, and this was one of the places that was bad enough where they actually came at us at night. So we did our insert, helos dropped us off, and we're in our perimeter, getting ready to start our offset patrol in to hit these compounds we get, when PKM and 2 RPGs just come zipping overhead. And luckily, we had, whenever we got inserted, we always had Apaches that escorted us in. They went over and started hammering these guys. They wound up killing like 30 people. And what had happened was, as it turned out, we were offset from a target, but where our offset was put us right next to where a bunch of other Taliban guys happened to be, and they thought we were coming to get them, so they maneuvered. Then when we did our offset patrol, got to our target, guys came at us in the dark. We could see them coming from the high ground. A fire team pushed out, shot them right when they came around the corner, completely no factor. And then, just 30 when they got within, they came around a corner 30 yards away from 2 AW gunners who just cut them down. And then one of those guys, I think later we figured out was probably some bigwig with the Taliban. So we took that compound and we took the high ground immediately behind it. But it was in a mountain range. So there was always going to be high ground around our high ground. The next day, once they figured out where we were at, and then they got on all the high ground around us, and then they just brought it. And I can remember, so where we were at on that high ground, it was like the ground was too hard to dig. We always brought 10 empty sandbags per guy so that you could fill them up and make defensive positions. We couldn't fill sandbags up because it was like trying to dig in your parking lot. So we just stacked all the rocks we could stack around us. And then they kicked this thing off with a barrage of RPGs and then just a steady stream of PKM fire, which is, their belt-fed machine gun. And I remember laying flat on my chest, and there's like 8 inches above my head and by the way, I took my body armor off because I was, it's hot. I'm going to take my body armor off and my helmet. And then I'm like, got my helmet back on, and I snaked into my body armor. Everybody did. And then the bullets are hitting the rocks steadily, 8 inches above my head. And the gunner he's 1,100 yards away, and he's just basically, almost
lobbing them in.
because we'd been shooting at the guy a little bit, and we just couldn't. He kept sliding behind a rock, and it was too windy to get him. And we had, I think we had a Reaper overhead, but in the middle of the day in Afghanistan, when the rocks are 90 degrees and a person's 90 degrees, it's worthless. They can't see people, and the Afghanis are not sitting out in the open where you can kill them. So I was like, and at the moment I wasn't scared, but I'm like, okay, I'm getting ready to get shot, and I'm getting ready to die by the sword. This is what I get, and that was it. And then our SATCOM radio antenna got shot and got knocked over, and so now we had no comms to get air support because we desperately needed to get some more air in. And then my boss, I don't know how he got shot. He didn't get shot, but the TU commander is like, all right, and he just got up there and fixed the antenna and was hitting it. Well, down in the compound, our guys just started lobbing mortars, and we used they started using the delayed fuses, so they were detonating 25 meters above the ground, which lays down an impressive frag pattern and tamped things down a bit. And then we just got hammered, and we're like, oh, this is not going to be good. Like 15 minutes later, they're like, hey, we got some air to you. And it's not like we weren't without air cover, because we did have a Reaper, and I think a Predator showed up too, but they're just limited. So 2 French jets showed up, and a lot of the coalition forces will be difficult with you sometimes when you're calling for air support and argue with you. And I'm not sure that these guys would have argued with us, but we just said, hey, there were 2 main ridge lines that we were taking heavy fire from. And we said, give us a show of force flight is where they'll fly real low over those ridge lines and see if it pushes their heads down. And they came in right over both ridge lines, and that tamped it down because they got down. And then a little while later, that slowed things down, and it was more manageable now for us. We get our heads up and start to shoot back a little bit. Then the B-1 bomber shows up, and they've got bombs to waste, and they gave us 4 500-pound bombs on each ridgeline, air burst at 100-yard increments. Boom, 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 and then that hammered them a bit. Then we were able to isolate some of the other guys, use our own organic weapons to hammer the other guys. And then we were like, phew, man, this place is bad. The next day, so we were supposed to extract that night. And we were like, hey, when's our extract? Oh, and at 2 p.m. on the high ground position, we ran out of water. And it was 114 degrees. So there's no shade, there's no water. It's just a massive suck fest. And nothing's coming until it gets dark. So we just waited. The helos came in after dark, kicked out pallets of water and ammo to resupply us. And they're like, by the way, you're staying for another 24 hours. Because what we didn't know is that us being there was having a huge effect on the whole battle space. And some other elements were able to adjust their position, and some of the Afghan surrogate forces were able to get a whole bunch of stuff done. But when we got that over the radio, I was like, oh, we're going to stay here? Like, don't they know that we almost got hammered? Like, this is the first time. Up until then, we always had the upper hand. They weren't really worried about getting overrun. And in this point, there was a real fear any second now we're going to get overrun. And then they're like, you're staying for another day. And I remember talking to my 2 platoon chiefs. I'm like, hey, we're staying here for another day, and you're going to push out and clear this stuff, and we're going to reinforce this position, and here's what we're going to do. And then they took a deep breath, and they're like, okay, roger that. And we stayed another day, and the next day we got into it. They threw it, came at us pretty hard again, but then we had a little bit more air support. we had developed a relationship with the 82nd Airborne Combat Air Brigade. They're Apache helicopters, which are like tanks in the air. Mm-hmm. They lived right down the road from us. And so we would have barbecues with them, and we would run a range and have them over, and then they would come shoot at the range, and we'd stand around and bullshit. They broke their sleep cycle. So this is really important for pilots. They have got to have a X amount of rest before they can fly. And they do not break their sleep cycle lightly. They broke their sleep cycle to come support us. And then they put themselves at risk where, like, the Afghanis don't like helicopters. So when a helicopter shows up, they'll sink. They flew low on purpose because they'll go, oh, that helicopter's low. I think I can hit it. And then they can't resist. They come out, and then these guys would just hammer them. And they came in the next night, and that was awesome.
Yeah, so I was still at TradeOut while all this was going on, and I remember I would get emails from you, from your task unit commander as well. And we would just be talking about, like, hey, this is what's going on. And I remember I was signing the emails back to you guys as the spiritual advisor for TU TriNet. I was there in spirit, dude.
Yeah, and we were hitting back up to you because there's a lot of massaging and stuff that has to get done. We got, like, I was looking at a picture in the hallway the other day, and it's that classic picture with the yellow smoke, and Mikey's there, and Seth's right behind him. And I never really studied everyone's gear, but I looked at Seth, and Seth's got the enhanced battle rifle, which is the M14 that just in the situation it didn't work for our lasers and our sights. So these guys up at Warcom fixed it up so you could use it and have 7.62 on the battlefield, and you guys all had that. And we got there right away, and they were just getting ready to field the Scar Heavy. And we got them to field it first overseas, which is not what they like. They like to field it first. Everyone trains with it. Yeah. We got them to field it overseas. That was awesome because all of our guys had, 173 grains of democracy and justice flying out there. So when we take a compound, right? Take clear compound, hold a compound. The Afghanis they were used to 5.56, so they would know, like, okay, it's pretty windy today, and I'm out at 500 yards. It's not likely you're going to hit me with your 5.56 round. So they would be like kind of out in the open, and we would just kill them. And then that circle would go out, and our guys were regularly getting guys at 5, 6, 7, 800 yards.
And these were just off the Scar Heavy.
So here's what they did. Most of our snipers took the Night Force 3x5 to 15 scope that was on our SR-25s, which that gun had some issues and would jam a lot, and then just put them on their Scars, and that's what they patrolled with. So they would have it all the way down in 3.5 power. So if you're patrolling, you can just swing it up. It's got a low magnification, so you have both eyes open, and you can shoot, and then they can put the bipods out and hit stuff far out. And those things were in freaking valuable, and it just brought a whole new dynamic to the battlefield. And the Scar had some problems. It's not a direct impingement thing where the gas doesn't go all the way back. It has a gas piston like the M14 did. Mm-hmm. They told us don't lube those, and guys would still lube them, and then it would jam up, and they're like, oh, this gun sucks. I'm like, well, I hope you lubed your gas piston. Yeah, I put a lot of lube on it. I'm like, don't do that. Don't do that. So that worked great, and that was awesome that we were able to get that over there. And the Commodore at the time basically gave us whatever we wanted and asked for. The support we got from Group 1 was incredible.
Now, you guys didn't really take that many casualties. I mean, no one got killed, right?
No one got killed.
How many guys got wounded?
2 guys got wounded with frag. We had a couple concussion injuries. where guys got knocked out, and it's hard to quantify how serious that is. And then on our turnover operation, when SEAL Team 1 came to relieve us, is when Dan Knoston got hit by that IED and lost both his legs.
Yeah.
And horrible event. And thank goodness, we're just like, there's so many things that lined up to save Dan's life, because we'd been inserted for an offset patrol, went in there, got in there, secured the bazaar, and then we pushed guys up to high ground like we always do, except for the Taliban suspected, if they come to take it, they mined the entire high ground. So as that element was pushing up, there was an explosion, and then there was quiet, and then TU commander gets on the radio, "Hey, was that a controlled det?" And the OIC who deployed with you came back, and he's like, "It was not a controlled det, and we've got some wounded." And we're like, "Okay, work through it." Get on the SATCOM. The 47s that had dropped us off, it was an SOP for them to have a flight surgeon on one of their birds. And so they hadn't made it all the way to base, or it may have been that they lawyered around for a little bit. That could have been too. So they were right there, and there was surgical stuff right there because Dan's wounds were absolutely horrible. And then once the EOD guy once that happened, and it was lucky because the charge went low order, so if it had gone high order, it would have killed like 6 guys. He discovers that they're in a minefield, basically. His metal detector is getting overrun, so he's got a bayonet or a big screwdriver, and he's probing the way out in front of the guys so they could get Dan out and onto the medevac that later got him back.
How long had you been on the ground for? Like a matter of 10, 15 minutes?
No. We did an offset, so we patrolled in for like 3 or 4 clicks. So it was a few hours. It wasn't a couple hours, but it was inside of an hour. That's why I'm not sure how long those 47s were loitering, or if they were on their way back and they were able to turn them around. But they were back quick, and they had that surgeon on there, which I think really made the difference for Dan, who, now the guy's running marathons. Yeah. I haven't run a marathon yet. I feel like such a loser.
And he's competed in the Olympics a couple times right now?
He got a gold in the Paralympics, right?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome. Awesome guy. Yeah, that was devastating. Devastating. I remember we got word back that, one of the guys, and we just assumed it was one of your guys, actually, because I don't think we even knew the turnover was taking place. I assumed it was one of your guys, but and then I heard it was Dan, and I remember the first phone call that I got, and I was like, "Is he gonna live?"
Oh yeah.
And at this point, they were like, "Yes, he is," because I know it was like touch and go. Mm-hmm. But then the first person that I don't remember who it was like, "Yes, he's stable, he's gonna live," and I was like, "Then we're good to go." And I just remember thinking, "Thank God he's gonna make it."
Yeah. The like on the second or third op we were there, our guys were doing an op with and we always had Afghani commandos with us because they were the partner force, the ODAs we were doing, and one of them stepped on a mine and it blew both his legs off and part of his arm. And one of our guys got cut in the face with his femur. And then there were some issues where when they were all of our tourniquets were failing because it had a plastic windlass that was going. And so the one guy, that got hit and they got cut in the face with his femur, and it messed him up mentally for a little bit. And I didn't know what to say to him. So I didn't say anything to him, and you know what? I wish I had, because I've come to a conclusion now with a lot of this pain that everybody carries around, that it's a poison you carry inside of you, and if you talk about it, it lets it out. And then it's kind of detoxing you a little bit. And so, like, I don't know, if you're listening to this and you're in a situation and someone's gone something through horrible and you don't know what to say something. Just sit down there and just talk with them about it, ask how they're doing, see if they can get it off their chest, because it helps.
Yeah, same thing. We had guys that I had one guy that got shot in the chest plate and got shot through the camelback on his back. Those are two different operations too. I mean, so what does that do to you when you're thinking, how close was I to just getting killed twice, in two different scenarios? And for sure, I think, if you don't, and what do we do in the teams? Like, make a joke about everything. Everything's a big joke, which probably helps in some cases.
I think it does.
But yeah, you definitely gotta, if you get the opportunity to talk to people about what's going on. And what I think it does is even more than I'm sure, I don't know, because I'm not a psychologist, but okay, there's the idea that you're letting this stuff out, right? I'm going to let this stuff out. There's also the idea that when you talk about something, you articulate what you're thinking, and you have to put it into words that somehow they become a thing that you can manage.
Yes, that makes complete sense.
So when you don't talk about it, it's just like you have a conversation with somebody about whatever. You want to debate with somebody about some subject. If you never debated about it before, you're going to be at a disadvantage because you don't really understand all the ins and outs. But when you actually talk to someone about it, then you say, oh, here's a point that I can make here, and here's a point that I can make there. If you don't talk about this stuff, it's just sitting in there and it doesn't get any better. You don't understand it any better. But when you talk, it's just like we were talking on the last podcast, how when you teach something, you understand it more because you have to detach from it to look at it from the outside. Well, if I explain something to you, I'm explaining it to myself too. I'm explaining it to myself too. And I told you this yesterday, when I had Tom Fife on the podcast, who was in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and got a Purple Heart and all those. And I asked him, I asked him some question about losing guys when he was a battalion commander in Vietnam 60 years ago. I didn't say that part, but I'm how did you guys handle casualties or something like that? And I don't know what the question was, but here he is, this, Army colonel, retired Army colonel, and he's talking about the guys that he lost 60 years ago, and he got choked up. And I remember looking at him and I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, this is the way I'm always going to feel about the guys that I lost. It's never going to go away.
Yeah.
And just hearing him talk about it and seeing that reaction, I was like, oh, okay. And that's what I tell all my bros now. I'm like, hey, you're always going to feel that way. It's just, here's a guy that was in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. He got a Purple Heart in all those, and he gets choked up talking about the guys that he lost in Vietnam and Korea and World War II. But, I specifically asked him about Vietnam. So when you talk about these things, I think you get some kind of handle on them because you have to articulate them in such a way that you can then, it's like what you have to name your enemy, right? You have to name your enemy. They say if you don't name the enemy, then how are you going to fight him? Well, it's the same thing when you actually say, hey, I really feel bad about this or whatever, or I think I could have done this better, or I think I made a mistake, or I wish we wouldn't, or whatever it is that you're thinking, whatever survivor's guilt, whatever that thing is that you have when you say it, you get to look at it, and you get to look at it from the outside and go, okay, yeah. I'm explaining this to Jason and I'm telling him what I'm thinking. And then while I'm explaining it to you, I'm explaining it to myself is what's happening. And that's why I think talking about it, not only does it get it out, but it gets you a handle on it somewhat.
Yeah. The process of it coming out of your mouth and then back into your ears, or maybe letting different parts of your brain adjust and deal with it. But yeah.
Check.
What else?
So you come home from Afghanistan. I mean,
and here's another thing I want to talk about too. And you brought this up in the book you were covering the last couple podcasts about fear. I'm like, once that first bullet goes by, or it just everything shuts down and you just go to what you're supposed to do. And then you do it. It's like in the moment, all emotion goes away. There's no fear. But then afterwards and before is when you have the fear. Like I would lay in my bed there and I would would picture notification going on for my wife. Like I could see the guys in blues driving out to my house, or, okay, this is a good chance that I'm going to get severely maimed. And I could picture myself sitting in a wheelchair outside of, the paddock that I have my horses in, and I can't even ride them anymore. And now I'm getting emotional about that, which is kind of, it's odd to me, but that's weird how it, when you're in the moment, you're not afraid. Later on, when you're thinking about it, is when you start to freak out about it a little bit.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and this has been confirmed over and over and over again, that the waiting is the worst. That's just,
Yep.
You're just anticipating, and then once you're going, you're going, and you got stuff to do. And I was never in situations where I didn't have anything to do, and there was
Right.
bad things happening. Where I was like, well, the few times I've been mortared, where I'm sitting there waiting for a mortar to either hit me or not hit me, that sucked a lot. But it wasn't it wasn't like an hour though.
Yeah.
It's like foom, foom. Okay, we got about 30 seconds, I don't know, maybe a minute before we find out where it's going to be at. But I also think that, if you're scared of dying, it's going to be a real nightmare all the time, I think.
Yeah, and like
paralyzing.
Like I said, that one point in Swellicott where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get. This is what I get. It was there was not fear. It was just an acceptance. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna get shot here pretty soon. I wonder how bad it's gonna hurt or burn or whatever it is. And it's like, all right, that's gonna happen. Okay. Now later on, you think about it. There's one other thing. I think on an earlier podcast, people were asking a question about if you had a routine, because I had a really definite routine that I went through prior to going out in Afghanistan, and it wasn't like anything religious, but I'd sit there, I'd be in my room, and we'd have everything but we had everything in our room, but we had a ready room and all that. So Iris had sent me this CD from this country singer, Cor Blund. I'd put that on, and then the first thing I'd go through is I'd change out every battery in all of my gear. Because you got your Pelter headsets, your nods, all that stuff's getting new batteries. Then I would go through and look at all my battle maps, clean out the ones from the last one, get my new battle maps for this one, study them. Then I would always carry 24 hours worth of water with me, and then pack out my food. Then I would go get fresh batteries for my radios. Then I would go through all of my gear, strip it down, put it back together for anything any special gear and equipment I needed for that op. There was later on, I liked to carry a 60 power spotting scope because I was spending a lot of time on high ground. Make sure that was all clean up. Make sure that my radio was charged with crypto, all that stuff. It would take me 2 hours to go through that whole process. And then we would go outside, we would do our comms checks together, and go out and get on the helicopters and get after it.
And so that routine right there is so good, because if you had all that stuff ready and you just sat there for 2 hours, that would not be fun.
No. No, and I mean, you got to check everything 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
I remember riding with a guy on a ride, and his battery died on his nods in the middle of the, when he's driving on a convoy. I'm like, good grief.
Yeah.
You didn't put a fresh one in? That cost 90 cents, dude.
My first deployment to Iraq, we were doing that, and we stopped. We stopped changing batteries for every op, after a week, because the ops were an hour long.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we realized we were going to run out of batteries. We just didn't have enough batteries. So we just went to hey, carry an extra battery. And You know, if it dies, then whatever, change it.
Yeah, ours were always all night.
Yeah, you guys were going out all night, isolated. You know, we were 10 feet from our Humvees or whatever, 20 yards from our Humvees. You have a big stack of batteries in there. It didn't matter. It's a totally different scenario. Yeah, I think that I would always be super busy with doing stupid, you know, officer stuff, whatever, before we go out. You know, getting this brief, checking in with this guy, whatever, doing all that stuff. And I would just get all ready, and it seems like I would work up until I got into a Humvee. That's the way
that's what my TU commander did too, and it was hard on him because he would go on the op already on a rest deficit.
Yeah.
And then when you're going to stay out there for 2 days, eventually, you know, he's got to go down. But we figured out like he would pass it off to one of the other OICs to be the GFC because he didn't want me to be the guy talking to the JTAC about what to drop.
He had more sense than that.
I would be pretty liberal.
There's a There's a picture of me and Dave Burke.
Good deal, Dave.
Yeah, good deal, Dave. And it's in downtown Ramadi. I think it's on the roof of Cop Falcon, and we're both just completely asleep, sitting there, just asleep.
Yeah.
And the same thing, because when I'd go out, a lot of times I'd been awake, and you know, all of us would be awake for a long time. So you get in the field and you're like, cool, I can sleep now.
and that was like, okay, so that was like one of the hardest things as a leader is like you get there, you get in the OP, and everybody wants to stay awake, and that means we're all going to hit the wall in like 6 hours. So it's you got to like go and say, hey, you 4 guys, get in there, and I need you to take sleep so you're ready to bump out on these security positions or these fighting positions or whatever it is. Because it's coming.
Yeah.
Everyone's just going to hit the wall at the same time and you're all asleep.
So tired. All right. So was that the last op you did was with Dan? Was that the very last op, or did you do a couple more?
I don't remember. It was pretty close to the last op because one of our platoons had already redeployed at that point. You know, in leadership, you're the first one there and the last one to go. So we didn't go until the last bird, but I think that was if it wasn't our last one, it was our second to last one.
Was coming home from this deployment any different than coming home from your other deployments?
Oh, yeah. I've been there for 8 months, and it was the most kinetic deployment of my career. So, yeah, NSW started doing the third location decompression stop where they're like, hey, before you get home, we want you to sit down and blow off some steam and sit down with a psych and talk to the psych a little bit. And our redeployment flight kept getting bumped, so we redeployed like I think 8 days later than we were supposed to, and every day it was like, hey, the bird's going to go tomorrow, get up, muster. They're like, nope, maybe tomorrow. And we did that for 8 days in a row. Finally, we got on it, and it was getting so long. I was really angry. I'm like, just let us go home. And they held their ground, and I'm really glad that they, held their ground, because when we got to the other location and you started drinking, I was just a freaking idiot. Drank way too much, but I needed it. I needed to blow off some steam and stuff, and it was good to have the other guys to talk to and to be somewhere where, my loved ones didn't have to see me being just a complete buffoon. And then, I got home, it took a lot. So I live kind of at the time I was living in East County, San Diego. And the area I live in is really similar to areas of Afghanistan. So I would find myself in my yard, and I was back and constantly scanning the high ground and doing a technique called ballooning. And that's where, I'm here, and then I'll sidestep here, and then I'll backstep here. And it's so like, you're just making it difficult if a sniper's aiming at you, that you're hoping that he's squeezing the trigger as you're stepping to the side and you're going to step out of his crosshairs, doing stuff like that. And then, when you go 8 months and every stressor that you have is a fight or flight, full-blown stressor, whether it's the enemy shooting you or indirect fire coming in, it's hard for your body to come back and then differentiate between somebody not agreeing with you on something you just said or anything else. My sleep was completely jacked up based on us operating a lot at night. And I've always had issues with my sleep. So on the deployment, I'd started taking Ambien, and they were giving it to me. And so I was having difficulty sleeping without that. And then, I think it was the first night or second night I was home, the dog started barking, and I kept a gun on the nightstand, which is just an SOP. Now it's in a safe because I have kids, but dogs are barking. I roll out of bed, grab the gun, and I'm at the ready, waiting. Just like, oh, okay. And then Iris, rolls out of bed and or looks up and sees me standing there naked, holding a gun next to the bed, breathing heavy, scanning both the entrances. And she's just like, oh, wow, what came back? And, I didn't get a chance to talk about my wife and where I met her, but she was a wrangler on a ranch that we go to a lot for training when I met her. And she's just hard, a good partner, soulmate, and she's been extremely patient and put up with a lot of stuff that most women wouldn't have. And when I came back, I was drinking heavily, and mainly, as I assess my drinking issues, it was because I was so wound up that it would be 4 beers is to where I could get myself back to where everybody else walks around in their daily life where they're just calm, because I was just like, and that's just a factor from one is not sleeping. And then the other one is just coming back from a deployment like that. It takes you a while to decelerate when people are shooting at you and all these horrible things are happening. And then now you're back in society, but you're not really, or you're back here in the U.S., but you're not really, you're not all the way back. And so, and my temper was like a millisecond fuse. We'll get mad about stupid stuff and all kinds of stuff. And finally she said to me, hey baby, you're not the same guy you were when you left. And I really want you to talk to somebody. And so immediately I got on the phone, I called up the psych, and I started seeing the psych and talking through a lot of the stuff that I had going on and started working at getting better. And it's a long process, and it was helpful to talk to those guys. To say that you have PTSD and is somehow maybe admitting a weakness, and I don't know if it's, how do you define PTSD? Mm-hmm. For me, it's like, okay, well, if I'm in a crowd, I get hyper alert. And when I came back from this deployment, I was hyper alert all the time, and adrenaline, just a constant steady drip of adrenaline going in. And that's why I was kind of drinking heavily to calm down. And then the vicious cycle I got into with the Ambien, and that's, and then my sleep been jacked up, and then inflammation and all the other health issues that came with that. So that was like kind of the first step. The second step was at this time I came over to the training detachment and 2010, and was now running the land warfare section for you. And Kirk Parsley was our diving medical officer at Group 1, mm-hmm. and he's a SEAL who later on went and got his doctorate and became a doctor. He kind of at that point was discovering that all these health issues that we were dealing with were revolved heavily around sleep. And so he was able to help me like get off the Ambien, start doing stuff to take, natural things to get my sleep back in order.
Did you ever do the sleep study? Did he put you on the sleep study?
He didn't, but I did a sleep study later, and I have sleep apnea, mm-hmm. and so I've got a CPAP machine that I sleep with for that, and that helps. But the sleep and diet are a linchpin, like sleep, diet, and exercise. There's the 3 pillars of good health. Probably is there a 4th pillar? probably like hypnosis or I don't know. Those are the big three, I would say. And getting that sleep fixed up helped my mental state a huge bit, and it helped my physical state. I was in terrible shape at the time. I had a lot of different joint pains and ailments, and so that was good. You know, I was taking melatonin, and he goes, how much melatonin do you take? I'm like, oh, I'm taking 6 milligrams. He's like, whoa. You know, your body is going to not make its own. And ideally, you get to the point where you're not even taking, you know, like some magnesium at night to help you calm down. And so that started me on the path, and that I was really glad, because otherwise I know guys that can't sleep without Ambien, and I don't think that they're not really getting into the sleep, and it's not good.
And at this time you were working at Pt.2.
Came back and took over the land warfare senior enlisted role there.
As it should be.
Yeah, that was my dream. Usually guys don't ask to go to Nyland, and I was like, hey, please send me out there. This is what I like.
Yeah.
And that was good to go. You know, it's really interesting, and we talked about this earlier. As we applied pressure to the different troops, we would see troops that were loaded with superstars. They had so much raw talent, but then they didn't own their mistakes, and they were just terrible.
They'd be terrible.
And we'd be like, what? Yeah. I know you guys are good to go. What is going on here? And then we would see troops that necessarily did not have a whole lot of raw talent, but they were very humble, and they kept their op plan super simple, and they would be the troops that the op 4 just couldn't, our opposition forces couldn't keep up with them.
That's just a fact, and it's over and over and over and over again and again and again. And the people that, it's interesting too, because you might think, well, if you're not humble, then you're going to be cocky. And if you're cocky with the training guys, then they're going to be more judgmental, and they're going to push you harder, and they're going to jump on everything mistake you make. It's not like that. It's so clear that when a troop was humble, they would fix themselves and fix the problems and the mistakes that they made. And when they weren't, you get 4 or 5 guys, 6, 7 guys in a troop that are cocky and arrogant. And not only are they not owning their own mistakes, but they're blaming everyone else inside their own troop. It just it's so horrible to watch.
Vicious.
It's horrible to watch, because they're at each other's throats. They're blaming each other for everything, and no one's taking ownership. It's just a total nightmare. And it has nothing to do. It's like even completely objectively looking at a troop, you just watch them fall apart because someone doesn't say, hey, you know what? Maybe we should just work together and try and do better. Which is essentially all you need to do, is say, wait a second, it took us 12 minutes. The Pt.2 guys timed us on getting our head count leaving that building. It took us 12 minutes. And in that 12 minutes, we took 4 more casualties. Maybe we should look at how we're getting our head counts. Whatever, just whatever little thing.
Yep.
And if you're an arrogant person, and then guess what? Then you end up with a bunch of new guys that are all arrogant, because they're all just imitating you. You know, they're all imitating the senior guys. There's not a new guy that checks into a team and goes, you know what? My chief seems a little bit arrogant. I'm going to be more humble. That doesn't happen. No, you're a new guy. You're like, I'm going to act like my platoon chief. That's what I'm going to do. And that's what you do. And you end up with a whole task unit of just people that don't want to say that they did anything wrong. And it was just horrible to see, because it'd be guys that were all over. I mean, guys, we know everyone, know everyone on the West Coast, know every guy. Like, they're our friends. And you'd be like, bro, no. And it was so hard. That was the hardest part of the job, was having to, you're looking at your friend and saying, bro, man, I'm not like, you're not, I'm not just saying this. You guys are doing really, really bad. And you need to fix some of this stuff, or you're not going to get through it. You're going to get reloaded.
Yeah.
And Yeah, that was the worst part of the job, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's super tricky just to be able to debrief these guys and do it in a manner where you don't sound condescending.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, God, I love that job. I would go out there. I had my little voice recorder, and I would sit there and I would take all my notes in the voice recorder because you can't write while all this stuff's going on. And sometimes I would just record the guys as they're freaking out, total panic, screaming at everyone. I just record them. And I'd get back and I'd be like, hey, man, okay, when you guys got strong point into that building, what were you thinking you wanted everyone to do? He's like, they just needed to move. And I go, okay, let me just play what you were saying. And you'd press play on the recorder and the guy'd be like, and you couldn't even understand him. Yeah. And I'd be like, man, bro, this isn't just me. And there's some guys that didn't like me, or whatever. It's like, it's not just me. And I like you, actually. I think you seem like a good dude. I'm just saying, like, these mistakes are bad. And they're not just made up, man.
No.
They're not just like, I'm not just making them up. You guys ran to the wrong target. And the whole task unit ran to the wrong target. You're in charge of the assault. And you ran to the wrong target and everyone followed you. And that just, you didn't do what you were supposed to do, and that's not good. And I'm not just saying this because I want to be cool. I'm saying this because it's not good.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
And the great opportunity of that is it was a nonstop experiment to where you could watch how guys organize themselves and how their organization structure responded to pressure.
Yeah.
And you could see like, oh, well, these guys are using decentralized command, and we can put all the dang pressure we have to bear short of killing every other guy, and they can still function.
Yep.
Or these guys have over-centralized their command, or there just isn't any, and I can put a fraction of pressure, and then it just cracks everywhere and falls out. And that's cool. I mean, again, I learned so much from the several years that I was doing that, but I could see the personality traits that guys were exhibiting as they came through there, and then how they were organized functionally and what worked and what didn't.
Yeah. And the other, and I just said a bunch of negative stuff about how much it sucked, but it was so awesome. You'd get these studs, these young SEAL beasts, E5s that would just be like, I'm taking this element, we're moving. And you'd be like, I love this guy. And they would just be awesome. And so you'd see that all the time too, of course.
Yeah.
And so that was what made it so cool. And yes, it's the ultimate leadership laboratory to experience from the outside, from the instructor cadre perspective of, we're going to put 28 platoons through this little problem. It's the same problem. And the only difference is, and you could say there's some difference in the guys, but there's really not. There's actually like the SEALs in the platoon, they're good. They're solid. They're fine. There's a couple knuckleheads. There's a couple great guys. There's guys in the middle, but that's not the difference. The difference is so blatantly clear, the leadership, that you just get to see that over and over and over again. So it's awesome.
Yep.
How long did you stay there for?
I was there 3 years.
And then what came next? You made Master Chief, and then wrapped up your time at Tradet, and then it was time to
go over to Team 5.
Check.
I went over to Team 5, and the way the progression is, you do a slot as the Operations Master Chief, and then the next cycle, we're built on a 2-year cycle, you would fleet up to become the Command Master Chief. And operations it is a crazy job because you are responsible for every single moving part that the SEAL team does. So you're looking at what all 9 platoons are doing for training. You're involved with where everybody is going to deploy, all the gear they got, all the ammo that they order, anything in between. Outside, you're dealing with all the other commands. And then, so halfway through our workup, the ISIL went and took Mosul, and then deployed. They split up how the team was organized, so that kind of threw a wrench into how we were deploying. We had to come up with a plan to possibly deploy half of the team during unit level training. And it was busy, but then it was a fantastic experience because you basically learn how to do everything. And then every time, so working with like, if someone came to me and they complained to me about our admin department, and then I would go to admin and like, hey, what's going on here? And then I would find out that like, well, half the blame, and sometimes all of it, lies with the guy complaining about it. Or, hey, this other unit over here, they're not doing this right. And then I just go over and talk to them and find out that, hey, they've got some issues I don't know about that we could help them out with, or we're not doing everything correctly. And so I took that stuff that I learned from, like Danny Carroll and Steve Hines and Monty Treesize and started to apply it outside of just a platoon level, but to a command level and a relationship level. And it worked out great. We got a lot of stuff done. Yeah, I'm rambling a little bit, but there you have it. That stuff. Every time there was a complaint, this isn't doing it right, they suck at this, I dig into it. And there were a couple times I didn't dig into it, and then I'd wind up with egg in my face. And now I just dig into everything. I take what someone tells me, like somebody gets in trouble over the weekend, and it's like, okay, this is what we heard right now. The first story is never the real story. And then we don't have to make a call now. Let's wait and let things develop and find out what the real facts are before we do something knee-jerk that we can't take back. And sometimes it winds out that it's worse, and sometimes it winds out then it's better. I remember one of the things I heard a general say on the deployment that I was on later on. He says he's not going to make a decision until he has to. They're like, hey, we want to do this. And he goes, do I need to make that decision today? No. Okay, then I'm not gonna, because he can let more facts come in. He can deal with more stuff, which made sense. That it was General Nagata, which was the SOC Cent commander when that stuff went on. And he was, I've never met him personally, but he believed in real flat communications. So when he sent out an email, there'd be like a couple hundred people CC'd on it. And because there's a tendency for people on staffs to use the flag officer they're working for. They're using them like the Wizard of Oz, right? They're like, oh, the general just said this. And then you're like, well, I saw his email, and that's not what he said. In fact, let me forward you the email and highlight it, and everyone else will be CC'd, and no one does that. But I've seen it happen a lot of times with other leadership who don't use flat comms, where people below them will start saying, this guy says this or this guy says that, and start doing a little bit of manipulation to maneuver whatever their agenda is, or just get things going the way they want to do. But one thing I heard
just to catch on that, don't make a decision until you have to. And there's a weird dichotomy in that, because there's plenty of quotes that are the opposite of that, which is a good plan right now is better than a great plan executed tomorrow or whatever. Or you got to be decisive. And the reality is I say this a lot, which is, if I know that we get intel that there's bad guys in this building, in this town somewhere, and they're like, we want you to go hit it. That doesn't mean it's like, okay, I decide right now, okay, yes, we're going to go hit it. We load up the vehicles and we start driving, and we drive there and hit it. No, we actually go, okay, well, let's let the information develop and we'll start planning. So I made a decision. The decision was to start planning. The decision is to go hit the target. And then it's like, okay, well, now it's nighttime. We have a good plan, but we're not sure. We haven't confirmed the intel. Okay, well, let's drive to a forward operating base and get staged, right? So we've still flexed. I've decided to do that, but we haven't decided to go hit the thing, but we're still prepared to if we need to. We've moved in the right direction. And then we get, intel that, well, we don't know, but a vehicle arrived at this person's house and we think it might be him. Okay, well, let's push to a staging point, right? We still haven't decided to hit it, but we've moved in that direction. And this happens with businesses too, where there's something unfolding, a new market, right? Hey, this new market might open up. Okay, let's invest all of our money into this new market right now. No, that's not a good move. Yeah. What you do is, okay, let's find out, let's invest a little bit of money and find out how big that market really is. Okay, cool. We do a little study. Oh, it turns out that market does look pretty big. Okay, let's do a little research and see what it would take for us to push into that market. Okay, cool. And so you're moving in the right direction, but you're not just jumping in with this decisiveness to say, okay, I've seen all I need to see. I've decided that we're just going to go all in right now. That doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. There's other times where it's like, guess what? We're standing in a hallway or we're standing in the street and we're getting shot at. We're going to get into a building. That's what we're going to do. Like, we're not going to move towards the building. No, we're going in the building because right now out here, we're going to die. So yes, be decisive in those situations. Be decisive when you have to be decisive. But if you don't have to make a decision, the big decision right now, and you can make a series of smaller decisions, iterative decisions that move you towards what you think decision you will have to make, then go that route.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you guys deploy to, and this is when you guys get into Mosul.
No,
not
that's
yet.
a following deployment.
Okay. So what'd you guys do on this deployment?
I went to the command split up. So the CO and the command master chief were up in Iraq, and then I was at another spot, non-disclosed location.
Check.
On a crisis response element with the XO.
And that was 6 months.
That was 6. Well, we did 5 months because at the time they said you have to be front door to front door in 6 months, and because you can't predict the airflow, we did a 5.5 month deployment. And then that was a big eye opener too, because we on that deployment I was going to an embassy once a week.
How'd the boys handle it? I mean, just
they did good. We had guys kind of spread out in different spots, and there was a big operation that went on there that one of the National Mission Force did, and our guys participated in it, and it was a good shooting deal. Nothing happened up in Iraq. I think it was frustrating for them, and then by the nature of how everything was, there was a really slow strike process. So when our guys could see a vehicle-borne IED driving towards Iraqi counterparts to blow them up, it would take 20 minutes to get clearance to drop a bomb on it. And
only 15 minutes to drive there.
And 5 minutes to drive there. So they just watch it happen live on TV, and they're like, ah. So that aspect of it was frustrating, and there wasn't a real clear decision made on what was going to happen at that point. So the guys up there didn't do much, but just spin, which is really difficult. Yeah. Like, hey, get ready. Oh, never mind. Hey, get ready. Oh, never mind. And that was good. So it was a good deployment overall. It was a good experience for me to kind of because I was the senior enlisted guy where I was at, and so that was great. And came back from that, and we did our change of command, and then I fleeted up to be the command master chief. And you don't really know who you're going to get paired up with when you're in that leadership role, because there's a commanding officer and a commanding master chief. And as it happened, I got paired up with a guy that was just awesome and I'd known forever. And the two of us are a lot alike personality-wise, which we realized, we went to a couple of leadership seminars, and they're like, you guys are almost the same person. So, hey, here's what you're going to have to watch out for, because both of you are really blunt. And I really won the lottery. It was a real pleasure working for him. He was a fantastic leader, and what he did really well specifically was he communicated a lot. So he always speaking with his his XO, his ops officer, myself, and then the task unit commanders. He spoke with once a week. He would have a meeting with them once a week, and he was all the way down to the platoon OIC, and he did it in a manner where he wasn't stepping on other people's toes. And there was never any guessing on where he was coming from or what he expected. And everybody knew that he cared about them was his first priority. And then the mission came after that, so that was really good. But hey, you know what? If you messed up, he'd hold you accountable. He'd give you a written counseling, and he did that for some of his guys who just did some shady stuff, and they're good dudes. And he's like, okay, well, hey, hopefully this stops here, and does a written counseling. So that was good. But
yeah, again, it's the same message that we talked about on the last podcast, which is just knowing where you stand.
Absolutely.
Having predictability, and when a guy's got a reputation like, oh, if you step out of line, you're going to get formal written counseling, that tightens people up immediately. Whereas if you think, oh, this guy's kind of a pushover, guess what you do? You cause more trouble and you cause more problems.
You really do. And it was like there was always an escalation with it, but it was straightforward. And then everybody always understood, like, hey, I'm not mad at you. These are just the standards we have here. And you did this. Here's the consequences of that. We need you to fix yourself. I'm rooting for you to fix yourself. I'm not mad at you. And then let's just move forward from here. Mm-hmm. Got back from that deployment, and then I got back in February. You started this podcast in December. Iris had started listening to it. And then, like I said, podcast 6 is when I started listening to it. And then I was caught up within a week because I was able to do it with my longer commute. And then just, you talk about, I wish I had this. I had the luxury of having this when I was in a really important leadership position, threefold: as a husband, as a father, and as a SEAL, right? And the priorities are almost always the same, or it's weighted heavily husband, father, SEAL. And so all the stuff that is discussed here through all these lessons from these books and all that, it can take and apply to every stinking aspect of my life. And I did it. And like the hardest thing for me was to really get introspective and honest with myself about what my shortfalls were. And it's not something that you can do overnight. It's not like I can get a shot and get inoculated. It's something that is water tortured in, and then I just growing so much from it. And like I'm going, the like starting with the dang season of the machetes, right?
Season.
That was like the first really dark podcast. And I was driving, I was wincing listening to that. I'm like, why did he do that to me? But then I appreciated how good I had it, right? And so now, as those podcasts are so dang necessary to understand how evil I could be, because I could completely go down any of those roads. And then once you understand that that's in your heart, you can control it, but then you can appreciate how good you have it, and you've got that, like the episode that you did on the Miley massacre. Mm. I had to pull my car over because I was crying, because I was so ashamed that this is, or like, I was just like, can't this story be about somebody else and not Americans? And then later on, when guys make chief, and I talked to you about this, I'm like, hey, when my guys make chief, we have to put them through all this training. A lot of the training I don't think is good. One of the things I did for them is like, hey, we're going to listen to these 3 podcasts. And Miley was one of them. The other one was Steal My Soldiers' Hearts, which was an awesome podcast and awesome lessons. And they're all awesome lessons, but it was all good because the guys had listened to it and we'd have discussions. And then, you came in and we VTC'd and talked to them. And that was such good stuff. But going down that road and then being in all these different situations at the executive levels of leaderships in the SEAL teams, and I could see in real time, I'm like, oh, okay, this is my face is getting flushed and I'm a little emotionally attached to this idea. My fists are clenched. What did he say? He told me to breathe. All right. And then I come back and like, or someone said something and I disagree with them and I just ran headlong into, a pillbox. I'm like, that did not work out well. Maybe I can learn to finesse it. And then it worked out great because I think we did. The feedback I've gotten anyway is that we did really good at the team and we dealt well with a lot of other people. And so that is a huge degree for myself, was having the podcast to learn these things in military history and then being able just to be introspective and improve on my life as a whole, and then having these discussions with because she listens to the podcast all the time, and we discuss it, and it's just been good for us across the board. When we deployed on that deployment, and that's during the deployment when we did the clearance into Mosul, we had one platoon that went to an area. And they were working under the conventional Marine. We were all working for the conventionals. The conventional forces in Iraq in 2016, 17, they were the main effort we were in support of. And then our guys went to a location where they inherited a pretty toxic relationship. And they took some of the lessons that you talked about and they went in there humble. They said, hey, how can we help? What can we do? Oh, hey, when are your normal battle rhythm meetings? We want to send a representative there so we make sure we're doing everything right and we're getting the word and all that. And they really leaned into it. They turned that relationship around in a matter of a month, completely around. And then they were in an area of Iraq out west there wasn't a lot going on out there at the time, but that colonel was so impressed with them and liked them, he bent over backwards to make sure that he could get them outside the wire so that they could get after it. And we were able to get them outside the wire. And at the end of deployment, all 5 of our platoons had been in combat. They were the last ones, the 5th platoon that hadn't, and then they got the opportunity to really mix it up on 2 operations. And it was 100% because of that colonel liked them as people and trusted them and wanted to see them do well. He wanted to celebrate it. And when people don't like you, they'll walk across the street to see you get screwed over.
Relationships are stronger than the chain of command.
Absolutely. And they had written in there, I love this because I copied this, on their whiteboard in their joint their JOC, they had at the top in all caps, relationships equal mission success. So when one of their E5s went over and talked to a Marine Corps E5, they were really cool with them. They didn't manage their own security like the Marines did security around their camp. They would bring dinner out to the guys that were standing watch at night. Just like it was awesome. And then everybody, there was a real sense of teamwork and stuff out there. So that was good. And
that was, but you guys did some real tough fighting inside of Mosul.
Yeah. Now our platoons that were up north, when they kicked off the liberation of Mosul, which was the biggest military operation since the invasion of Iraq, and there were, I believe, 3 different main lines of approach going towards the city, and ISIS pretty much controlled everything on the outside. Guys, the first couple days of that, there were semi-trucks that were loaded with explosive, vehicle-borne IEDs that was a semi. Like, I don't think, outside of the Moab, we don't have a bomb that's carrying that much stuff coming at them. And that's where, EOD Chief Finan was killed on the first couple days. when our guys had gotten into an area. They were partnered up with the Peshmerga, which are the who are the guys that Kurds, yeah.
Kurds.
Yeah. So they're partnered up with them, and they were pressing into an area, and they got into an area that was just too laden with IEDs, and they were having to back up their Mat V, the truck they were driving in, and Jason had the door open so he could make sure that he was in the same tire tracks of that he'd just driven over. Unfortunately, they'd driven over a crush plate once. It crushed it halfway. They hit the rest of the crush plate, and it was a daisy chain of explosives. It went off. He ate, a bunch of it hit him right in the face. It was a fairly horrible experience for our guys that were there because he was still breathing. Biologically, he was alive for like the hour that they were with him before they could finally get a medevac to him. That was too hot. The medevac wouldn't come in, so they had to offload him off the truck, get him in the back of a pickup truck, and then drive through all this heavy fire and a lot more IEDs to get him on board the medevac, and then then he expired. And it's the worst case scenario, period. And it's something that we drilled. We started drilling, we call it a Keiko drill, for when you lose a guy back on the strand, and we would do full-blown drills like, okay, here's what we need to do to cover down on that so that we're ready. And I'm a little bit superstitious. I think if we practice to do something a whole bunch of times, it's not going to happen. And then it happened, but luckily it's something that it's not lucky that it happened, but it's something that we drilled. And more so, we had like a book, because there's an incredible amount of emotion, and everyone gets excited. They all want to do stuff. And so sometimes there's too much that you can do, and you can confuse a situation. So we just opened it. We had the Keiko book. We opened it up, and like our admin guy is like, hey, what's step one? And he goes down, he goes, all right, we need to do this. What's step two? We need to do this. There's no way we would have remembered that. Mm-hmm. We went through it, went through the steps. One of the things that I was pretty adamant about is because I had a good idea, although I haven't experienced it directly, about what my guys had gone through that were there with him. And I wanted to get a psych out to just help them unpack some of the stuff they went through before the end of deployment. So he could do two things. He could get out there and help them unpack what they were, what they went through, and then he built up some rapport. So at the end of deployment, on the next stop, they had some rapport with them. So the group sent the guy out. Now, this is like 3 weeks after this happened, because the best thing to do is to do something. And the guy stayed busy because there was a freaking war to fight. But then when stuff tapered down for them, and now like, oh, there's downtime. Hey, guess what? The psych's coming out, and he's going to hang out there. And you don't need to speak with him, but he's available. And typically, he'll get out there. He puts a thing up. Hey, you want to speak with? No one signs it. But then he's just there, and at lunchtime, a guy hits him up, and then later on, another guy hits him up. And yeah, and the guys went through, and there was heavy fighting up until the day that we redeployed. Like Team 7 basically came in and were doing turnover ops and going out and doing stuff there in Mosul. There was a little bit of a lull when Eastern Mosul was finally cleared, and then there was a big reassessment on moving over to the other side of the river. But it was busy, and it was pretty good. I mean, we had a couple of vehicle-borne IEDs that got within 100 yards of our guys before they were able to kill them with. And then the driver's got like a kill switch on him. So when he dies,
it gets released. Yeah.
It gets released and detonates. And there was no shortage of, I think there was at least like 7 or 8 of these things coming at us a day. And then they'd been prepping for months. So they were laid in all across Mosul. There was a garage underground that had a V-bit in it. And so as the front line moved closer, all of a sudden this car would just drive out and drive right into the Iraqis and blow them up. And there's no time to hit it with a Hellfire or stop it or whatever. And they had them coming pretty quick.
Yeah, going back to the casualty plan, you were giving me it's a hard time, but you were harassing me saying, like, when are you going to write your protocol book? Because I talk about, how you got to have protocol for certain situations that are,
right,
like you said, things that are real emotional, things that are moving real quick, things that you need to be thinking about, but you won't be able to think clearly about when they're actually going on. And that's what you're talking about. You guys put together a protocol to follow, and the Navy has one and the teams have one, but you got to look at it and actually understand what it means. You can't just open up a book that you've never looked at before. So, but that protocol idea for your life is definitely a powerful thing, especially for things that are going to be emotional and rough to go through. If you have a good protocol, commence the protocol. Step 1. And you also talked about the guys continuing to be busy, and that's absolutely true. If you're going to sit around you're just going to think about the horrible event you just went through, and that's not going to go well because you're not ready to deal with it. So get back to work, let it settle a little bit, and then you have to deal with it later. But you do have to deal with it at some point.
Yeah, I know that. Like, one of the times that I got to go out to basically the flot with our guys who were going advise and assist, and they would be about 3 blocks back or 4 blocks back from the front lines. The civilians that lived in Mosul would just move away from where the fighting was and then just kind of mingle around just outside of it and then go back to their houses. So we were at this one location where the guys were providing support to the Iraqi CTS, and we had snipers up on rooftops. We were able to see all the way to the front lines and take shots, and then we were also using mortars pretty heavily. We got some 81s in that are just friggin' awesome. So one thing, and another story right after this. So there's all these civilians around, which is a little nerve-wracking because who's who, right? And there were a bunch of kids. There were some kids living in the building next to, with their families next to where our trucks were parked. And they were really nice kids, and they spoke pretty clear English, and they wanted candy and stuff. So we were chatting with them a little bit and messing around. And then, so we were there all day. And then in the evening, a bunch more kids came out. There was a whole group of kids, and I don't know if they just come in the area or it was the evening and they just wanted to come out and play. And so we were in this area where there weren't a lot of buildings, so we were right in the middle of this big field, so we could see anything coming. And the kids were all playing, and then a salvo of 120s came in, and so 120 millimeter mortars, boom, boom, and they basically kind of bracketed us. But then where one of them landed was right where those poor kids were. And I looked over there, and I saw like this beautiful little girl hopping away in the smoke, and she was missing a leg. And then I saw a guy run out and snatch up a little body, and he's just wailing. I thought about my kids at home and what those people are going through and how awful it must be. and how we just got to redouble our efforts to stop this freaking crap that was going on with ISIL, because it is just so unsat. Because little kids are little kids are little kids, wherever they're from or what, and to see innocence shattered like that, it was rough. But that's part about, knowing the darkness, and what does that do? That makes me appreciate my kids more. And then never pass up an opportunity to hug them or tell them I love them or anything like that.
Yeah, and those kind of stories right there, I pretty regularly have to explain to people that there are evil human beings in the world, that those people that drop those mortars, they don't care about those kids at all. And I heard other stories from guys coming back from Mosul after you were there, where one of the biggest risks that was going on was the guys doing the EOD job. Well, what does the EOD guy do? He dismantles bombs. Well, they do that in the lowest possible risk way that they can, which often means if they find an IED of some kind, what do? They just blow it up in place. They send a robot over there and detonate the thing and just blow it up. And that makes your job a lot less risky. Well, what was happening over there, it was suicide. There was suicide bombers. Okay, so what do you do with a suicide bomber? Well, what you do with a suicide bomber that comes up that's wearing a suicide vest, you shoot him and you kill him. And that makes your job pretty easy, because then once you got a dead person with a bomb on their chest, you can send a robot over there and blow up the bomb. Well, what happened, and what some of these stories I got told, was that ISIS was putting these suicide vests on little kids. Ugh. And so you can't shoot the little kid, and you don't want the little kid to get detonated. And it was one of the riskiest things that they had to do. And that's the kind of thing that there's a lot of, I'm not saying America is a perfect place, because it is not, but that kind of, when you hear a story like that, and that there's some random EOD guy with a wife and kids at home and whatever else he's got going on, and he puts all that on the line to try and help some little Iraqi kid from getting blown up. That's, say what you want about America, but that right there is America.
We went out to the guys were going out to the Flot every day. I got an opportunity to go out with them another time when they were right on the edge of Mosul going into it, and the building that they were occupying was a school. And one thing I noticed as I was walking through the buildings of the school is that on the walls of the school, inside the classrooms, had all the Disney princesses, Dora the Explorer, all the stuff that our kids enjoy. So it's twofold. There's a thought like, our Western culture and lifestyle is going to get overrun. Negative, because Western culture, on the whole, while you said it's not perfect, is still the best thing going, and it is completely contagious. And even over there in Iraq, in a school that was controlled by ISIL, their little kids are looking at the Disney princesses and Dora the Explorer and, that stuff, Western things, because it's good, it's appealing.
Yeah.
And that gave me a tremendous amount of hope.
Yeah, that's
in just our culture and way of life moving forward.
That's the whole idea of months ago when I had said that, you want to solve the problem in North Korea, give those people iPhones so they can start watching YouTube. Because you watch a couple of YouTube videos and you look around at your, barren neighborhood where you're eating like water with salt in it is your dinner, and you watch a YouTube video of people eating steaks and McDonald's and Subway, and you think to yourself, something's not right here.
Yeah.
And it's not going to take real long before those people say, look, we're doing this wrong. And you probably heard that story about Gorbachev when Gorbachev came to America and went in. Have you heard the story?
No.
Gorbachev came to America from the Soviet Union, and he went into like a Vons or whatever supermarket he went into, and he went into the cereal aisle and saw that there was 390 different kinds of cereal in there. And he realized that they needed to stop what they were doing, because you know how many different types of cereal there was in the Soviet Union? One. You know, that's it. And when you try and control everything, it doesn't work. And actually, I remember you calling me up one day. You're like, hey, he was like, I was listening to this podcast. This applies to everything, because like it's the same with government. I'm like, yes, it is. You can't control everything. If one person tries to make all the decisions, it doesn't work. I was actually going to read this Thomas Sowell chunk from when I last time I had Jordan Peterson on, because he lays out this thing about how the government trying to control the pricing of some kind of pelt, and if the government raises the prices, every hunter goes and gets all these pelts and then turns them into the government. And then the government, what do they have now? An excess of pelts. And so now what do they do with them all? They don't do anything, because there's nothing to do with them, because they aren't needed. And this whole cycle unfolds where things just don't work with centralized command. Yeah. And things like Dora the Explorer and the Disney princesses and Thomas the Tank Engine and all these Mikey and the Dragons, these things are going to spread. And those evil bastards, what do they do to try and stop it? What do? They try and control anything, any form of freedom, and especially freedom of speech, controlling the internet, all those things. And it's disturbing to see. But I believe that, like in Jurassic Park, Echo, movie reference.
My dad was in that movie,
give me a
by
credit.
the way.
Was he really?
Yeah. He's like one of the first guys to appear on the screen. He just walks past. He's an extra.
Still.
Still, that's something. Yeah.
In that movie, I think the line is, life will find a way, right?
Yep.
Like, life will find a way?
Yes.
That's what happens. I think so. With all these folks will remember. Those folks in Mosul, they'll remember that. They'll remember who gave them freedom. And by the way, it was Iraqi troops, which was amazing to hear. The Iraqi troops fighting hard and sacrificing, because in Ramadi it was pretty rough to get the Iraqi troops to take lead. And when they would take lead, the insurgents would be waiting for them and would deal heavy blows to those guys, and it was a nightmare to watch. But it's awesome that they stepped up and they did the house-to-house clearance. Were they heavily supported by coalition forces, by Americans and firepower and all that? Yeah, but guess what? I mean, how many people did they lose?
At one point, we thought we were going to lose our entire partner force. When they first kicked it off, they were losing 15 to 20 guys a day. And we did the math. We're like, at this rate, and it was because our strike process was really slow and it hadn't gotten decentralized yet. That was fixed later. But we're like, okay, at this rate, in 3 weeks, these guys, our entire partner force is going to be gone.
Yeah. And what's really impressive is that we lost a battalion in Ramadi. They deserted. And they had shown up. They did a couple operations, they took some casualties, and they left. And so for those guys, when you were in Mosul, to take massive casualties and stick it out, that shows you that how that's just leaps, and it's incomparable to what it was like before.
It was their CT, their counterterrorism unit, which is their like premier, basically tier 1. Yeah. They were all really, really good to go, dialed in. And it was just, the fighting was so brutal, they were losing guys heavily.
Yeah. And the other funny thing, somebody put this on social media the other day. and it was like Jocko Willink predicts the future or something like that, because I was on with Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan's like, what do you do about these ISIS guys? And how could you ever defeat them? And I was like, if you gave the ISIS problem to like a Marine Corps second lieutenant and said like, hey, figure out a plan on how to beat these guys, they could do it. It's like, there's a bunch of bad guys, surround them and move through and kill them all. That's what we're going to do. And he's like, yeah, that actually did happen. And that is what happened.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. And the amount of attrition that took place was awesome.
Yeah.
And for those people that think that you can't kill an idea, they're wrong.
You know, and then there was some of the stuff where ISIL had gotten so hysterical with there was a video, there was one of those, you know, they do those horrible videos.
Yeah.
And it was something happened over in Syria, and they released a video where they killed like 9 guys, but they were from the local area. And then I guess the tribe was like, hey, can we have the bodies back of our guys you just killed? And they're like, no. So the next day, a suicide bomber walks into the ISIL headquarters in that area from that tribe, which the way the tribalism works, they're willing to do that. And boom, clacked off, killed like 30 people. They just, you know, and I think there's 1 or 2 people that are kind of hardwired maybe to do that out of 1,000.
Yeah.
And they have to do these videos and force people
Totally.
to do that stuff because it's not in their nature. It certainly isn't in mine. That's
another big misconception is like, oh, they're just willing to die. No, they're getting coerced and forced into those situations. You know, that's what's actually happening. Like you said, sure, is there 1 out of 1,000 that's like so brainwashed that they're like, yes, I'm going to go be a martyr? Sure, there is some of those, but most of them are, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to kill your whole family. So which one do you want? And the guys go, yeah, okay, go ahead, kill my whole family.
And I'm talking about situations too where they got like a guy strapped to a post with the thing on, and then they tell someone go stab him, and the guy, no one wants to do that. You know, like they were doing what the Japanese were doing in World War II.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Hey, go hack off some heads for training today. Go kill some poor Chinese farmer.
Yeah.
Go. And no one wants to do. Most people don't want to do that. And that's like in their situation too. A lot of those people are like, I don't want anything to do with this. No.
Yeah.
Well, you got to do it, or the result is we're going to kill your family, and then they just get into a situation where they're doing it, and it's not good. Anyhow, on a positive note, like on that deployment, I cleaned my dang diet up as a result of, you know, Peter Attia being on this podcast, and now I'm listening to Peter Attia's podcast and keeping smart on my health, and started doing, basically, I did pretty strict keto. There was a couple weeks where I ate nothing but eggs and sardines. And man, that is boring. But I found, you know, my inflammation went away. I dropped pounds and I was getting in good shape. And then I started experimenting with the intermittent fasting, which is something that I'm still doing now. And that's good stuff.
Did you start that during deployment, before deployment?
On deployment, I'm like, hey, okay, I'm going to quit eating sugar. Because you'd mentioned sugar's bad for you, and I never really paid attention to it because I think
you mentioned it before.
Sugar is bad, and then I'm like, okay. I'm like, hey, I'm going to stop eating sugar, and I was eating big salads and stuff like that, and there was a guy that I was deployed with that's really smart on this stuff. And he's like, well, hey, if you stopped eating sugar, then you need to quit eating that yogurt, and that milk's got a lot of sugar in it. And guess what? That fruit has got a lot of sugar in it. So, man, then I started looking at labels, getting smart, picked up a book, read it on basically, you know, how I eat now is roundabout a paleo thing. Like I try to avoid grains and carbohydrates and stuff that's processed.
I'm laughing because the other day you're like, you know, I mean, you're like, yeah, you know, I stay that way, but then you're like, but if I go to someone's house and they say like, hey, do you want a piece of bread or whatever? Yeah,
I eat it.
Yeah,
because there's another aspect to that. I don't want to be the vegan guy who is like, hey, you know what? I'm better than you because I'm a vegan. So
I'm on the I'm better than you diet.
Yeah. And so it's like really uncool if someone offers you food to say no.
Yeah.
So that's something I weigh out. If it's like, oh, okay, I go over to your house and we're having pieces for dinner, that's what I'm going to eat because I can afford to eat a piece of pizza or
you're not going to die. Yeah. And then you just got to watch out for the slippery slope.
Oh,
because it is, I say no to bread all the time. You know, no, I'm good. And then, like you said, if it's someone, hey, if it's a situation that unfolds where it's like, oh, I'm going to look like, I'm going to be bringing attention to myself is really what it boils down to. I'm going to make everyone talk to me about me and my little thing. It's like, no, I'm not that important. I'm just some dude who like is weird. So I'm not going to make a big thing out of that.
Yeah. And bread's handy. I mean, you can eat some meat without getting your fingers all dirty.
Yeah, no, it is handy. And the lettuce wraps, while good in theory, and actually, have you had someone make a burger? I had one the other day. It was an iceberg. I asked for like lettuce on the burger, and it was iceberg lettuce, cut in like basically in half. So it was two big giant chunks, and it worked really well.
Oh, that's great.
I was pretty, because normally it's like, oh, they give you that one big piece of lettuce that's all wilted by the time it gets you. You can't pick that thing up. It's not happening. You actually got to use a fork and knife to eat a burger, which in its own right is kind of disturbing, right?
Yes.
If we're eating burgers and we're using a fork and knife, we don't respect that. I mean, that's just not something that we're doing. But all of a sudden we are if we got wilted lettuce on the situation.
Gotta do it, yeah.
Check. And so you cleaned up your diet. What did you weigh when you went on deployment?
193 pounds, and I'm 5'6".
And then what'd you weigh when you got home?
I think I was 165.
How did you feel mentally?
Way better.
Yeah.
And
Doc Parsley had already cleaned up your sleep habits.
Yeah.
So you were basically getting on step.
Right. As I've been on step probably for 2 years, and you know, sleep's like anything else. You just got to be disciplined with it. I don't get up at 4:30 in the morning. I get up around 5:30 or 6, but I'm really careful that like, you know, the lights are all out, because for me, even stupid little lights will wake me up, and it's quiet and all that. And then I got one of those weighted blankets, which is pretty cool.
You must have told my wife about that, or Iris did, because we have a weighted blanket now too. It's not on my side of the bed; it's just on her side of the bed.
Yeah, they're not cool in the summertime because they're too hot.
Oh yeah,
but man, I just go to sleep and sleep. I don't wake up at all till the next morning. You know, like normally you wake up a couple times during the night, and that thing you just get under there and you feel all safe, and you're like, oh, feel like I'm in the womb. I'm done.
You got the weighted blanket, you got the CPAP machine. You're just keeping it real.
Yeah.
One of our mutual friends that has a CPAP machine, and his wife was like, you know, when your mask comes off, I'm trying to wake you up so you can put it back on. And he's like, don't just leave me alone. And she's like, well, what if your mask comes off and then you stop breathing? And he's like, well, just let me die. So that's good. So you come home from that deployment.
Yeah.
And then what'd you do when you got back?
I went over to TRADET and became the command master chief there, and then started, preparing to making sure all the fundamentals that you'd stayed in place were still there, and they were still there. The guys are just really hard and doing a good job. And then and that was it. Overrunning unit level training and seeing that, and then working myself out of a job, getting the guy that's my replacement set up to take my job. And here's the deal, like, as I leave Naval Special Warfare, they are so good to go. And I see the younger guys now that are coming up at every level. People like to complain about the millennials, and I really don't see any issue with them because they're doing good. And when I measure myself against who they are when I was their age, they're way better. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Biggest problem I have with millennials right now is I look at them, I'm like, how are you so much bigger and stronger and smarter than I ever was when I was 22? Come on. I told you this the other day. I roll in here and I hear some like guys training over on like another mat, and I look over there and they're clearly young frogmen, and there's 6 of them and they're all dripping with sweat because they've been getting after it hard, and they all look like they're yoked and just ready to go start just killing people. And I'm like, what's up, fellas? And they're like, we're getting ready to go to land warfare. I said, legit. I was just so happy.
Yeah.
And it just, you're right. These guys in the teams right now and in the military at large, if you're going in the military, you're doing it for a reason. You know, when you and I joined, there wasn't no war going on. We were hoping there would be, but you're going in now, like, you know what's up. You know what you're doing. You know what you're stepping into. And now, retirement. You good to go?
I think so. I'm really excited. 30 years is a long enough time to where I'm like, oh, I'm ready to go. Have my locker.
The hardest part is that, like, I'm glad that you're going with the feeling like, hey, things are good to go. Yeah. Because the hardest part is you start thinking that you are so critical. And now, like, oh, what? And it's like, no, there's 10 guys that are just as good as me, better than me, and they're all going to get in there and they're going to do a better job than I could have ever done. And then the other thing is, like, when you hear some rumor or whatever about something going sideways, and you get all freaked out because you want to be like back where you can help, and you got guys going on deployment. Like, if something, it just like that, you have to. It's just hard to let go. And I mean, I'm not saying you're gonna be able to let it go, but it's hard to not just think about it the same all the time. Like, it's hard to come to grips with the fact that you're not in the teams anymore. That's all it is.
Yeah. And then I'm super appreciative that I'm getting to work with Echelon Front, because the best thing about being in the teams is the peer group. Yeah. And so I'm trading right into the same peer group of just a bunch of awesome people, and then getting to go. And I really enjoyed, like, a third of my career was at SEAL Team 5. The other third of it was at TRADET. And I really, really enjoy working with people, teaching, passing stuff on, learning. I'm always learning. And I'm super excited about it.
Yeah. It's, like I said, once you get over the fact, and I'll give you a little heads up. Have you cleaned out your locker yet?
It's like 80% done.
Okay, yeah. That last 20% sucks.
Yeah.
That's the worst part. For me, loading that stuff into my van and knowing, and then your access card doesn't work anymore. It's just like game over. And you just drive out. And, you know, especially for guys like you and me, and, you know, you even I was in for 20 years, you were in for 30. But, I mean, how many memories do you have at the SEAL Team 1 grinder, at the SEAL Team 3 grinder, at the TRADET building? It's like my whole life is right there. And you know when you're leaving, you're just it's it's
scary because all those memories are there. But man, they're good memories, and I know that if I pick up the phone, guys will answer. And
yeah, you know, when faculty died, like last year, and I was like, what I felt like, all that, yeah, I just felt like all that memory that he had of us is gone. Like, that he had of me and all my little running mates that I used to run around with, and we were all Team 1 guys, and we were all, and like, he had these images of us and knew us when we were little kids and kept us out of trouble and all that stuff. And I'm thinking all those things, which he had a perspective that only he could have. And like, I was like, oh, those are all gone. And that was a crappy feeling of just, damn, why does that have to go? And I never got him on the podcast either, which is a freaking shame.
Yeah.
But the good thing is, like you said, we're still all just kicking it.
Yeah. And I mean, really, it's like just this Naval Special Warfare, or any organization or team, we're just in that for that little time. And then it's shaped us way more than we shaped it. We had our influence, and it'll just keep on going. And that's like there's a piece of us that's never, ever, ever going to die. Yep. As long as this country's around, or there are guys doing frogman stuff, there'll be a little piece that it gave us and we gave it. They're moving forward.
Yep.
That's good to go.
It's about as good as it gets. About as good as it gets. I think that's probably a good spot. And we might both be retired, Echo Charles, but we're not done yet. Mm-hmm. In fact, we're just getting warmed up. Plenty of fighting, albeit in a different way. Sure. That is left to do, and we're going to do it. You got any suggestions on how we can stay in the fight?
Stay in the fight and on the path, big time.
Yeah.
Okay, first thing, jiu-jitsu, right? A little bit more direct relationship to the expression fight. Jiu-jitsu. If you're not doing it, do it. For many benefits that we always talk about. I'm not going to go too deep into it. I wanted to because I was thinking about it. You know, some people don't call it a jiu-jitsu match or jiu-jitsu training or whatever. They don't fight. Some people do, some people don't. So this is what I kind of discovered or realized, that if other types of fighters or martial arts practitioners, they tend to not call jiu-jitsu a fight. You know, like, oh, no, it's not a fight. You know, it's a match or it's a whatever. And then you have the totalitarian kind of attitude, which is like, hey, anything that you're struggling against another person or another force, it's a fight.
Even for you, going to the grocery store and looking for a certain kind of
it can be a fight.
Spaghetti sauce is a fight.
Yes,
it's a struggle.
Sometimes, sometimes. Especially when I'm doing it for somebody else. It's another element. Nonetheless, that's the way I look at it.
If you and I roll,
yes,
and we go hard,
yes,
is that a
fight?
That's a fight for you, huh?
Well, okay. So because I look at it in that way, anything that I'm struggling against another person or force, or in your case, another person and force, it's a fight. So that, you know, with you, that's essentially a good example. Unless fighting, all-out war, total war. It's good to exercise that in our lives.
That whole book, Psychology for the Fighting Man, is just so good. But just starting off with total war, and when you start to view your life through the aspect of just total war.
Yeah.
Because now we're taking it to the next level. This workout I'm going to be total war.
Yeah.
This person that's trying to get somebody hit me up on social media today. Said he was getting emotionally blackmailed.
Okay.
He said, "What would you do?" And I was like, "I'm not getting emotionally blackmailed. No factor."
Stifle your emotions.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, you're not, because it's like
I don't even know
you don't even have emotions.
But.
So how can you blackmail some person? So yeah, I mean, but it makes sense though. I don't know though, because emotions sometimes can be more of a thing.
Well, yeah.
For certain people, that's kind of everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Unless
if you have no emotions, well, then you're going to have real problems.
Yeah, it's like me
but
trying to.
But you should learn to control your emotions. And one thing that can help you learn to control your emotions is jiu-jitsu.
Because it's an exercise in prepping for all-out war in life. Very good, direct. Anyway, when we're doing jiu-jitsu, we need a gi and rash guards. That's essentially the uniforms. For the jiu-jitsu, and you get that at the best ones anyway, at Origin. OriginMaine.com, that's where you get it. It is in Farmington, Maine, all made in America.
Yeah. Which is not a small deal.
Not a small deal at all.
You can say, oh, whatever. No, it's a big deal.
Yeah, you can say that.
What's awesome about, speaking of America, is going up to Farmington, Maine and seeing a factory with 40 people working in it, craftsmen making stuff here.
Yeah.
Bringing back a town, right?
Yeah.
Bringing back an industry.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing here. Movement, check.
Yep.
You can get rash guards.
Other clothes, joggers, athletic gear, apparently jeans, from what I hear.
Yeah. You don't know about those yet.
American denim.
And then we got supplements.
Yeah.
Jason Gardner, talk to me about Origin Jocko supplements coming at you live.
Yeah, I am on the joint warfare, 2 in the morning, 2 at night, krill oil every morning, and I am on the milk train. I am on the milk train. You know, when I want to have some dessert, and I'm like, you know what? Almond milk, and then a scoop of the mint chip milk. Hit that with a stick blender. It satiates me. And then every morning in my coffee, I got a scoop of the vanilla milk.
Actually, now that you know the video you made with Tim Ford, where he's like probiotics.
Yeah.
That was Jason. Jason was like, I wasn't sure if I was gonna get that stuff, but then I saw it had probiotics.
It's real.
I'm all
So I
laughing.
just
I was
ordered
like,
it 'cause I need some.
probiotics.
Yeah.
Because that's what you need.
Have you
Get
seen
the
that video
gut
before?
genomes
I did.
in health. Did you know that was you?
Yeah, I pretty much figured it. I'm like, hey, that guy's me. He's got it all in his mustache when he gobbles it down. That's exactly. I was on the site looking. I'm like, I want to look at this milk. I'm like, man. So first of all, it said keto compliant on there. I'm like, oh, good to go, because a lot of the protein stuff is loaded with sugar.
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
And then I saw probiotics. I'm like, okay, I'm done.
Here's
I need this.
the issue. It's either loaded with sugar, or it tastes horrible. Because even you put whatever artificial sweeteners taste horrible, except for the one that we use, which is not artificial. It's actually from nature itself.
Yeah, that monk fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can get all those from originmaine.com. And I also realized that you haven't tried the Warrior Kids strawberry milk yet.
I haven't.
And I'm going to get that to you.
Awesome.
And you're going to get nuts, bro. It is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. So get some of that. Check.
Yep, it's true. Also, Jocko has a store, as we all know by now. It's called Jocko Store. So you go to jockostore.com. This is where you can get your shirts, more rash guards, trucker hats, flex fit hats. We're doing both.
Do we know which one sells more?
They're even.
Really? Or are you just making that
They
up?
were even when I checked.
When did you check?
I
This
don't
is
know.
like
A few
such
months
a
ago.
scam. What
No,
he's
no,
telling
no,
out.
no. A few months
He's
ago,
so
it was-
untruthful.
No.
Nothing he just said to me made any
It
sense
is 100%
whatsoever.
true.
Dude, I
100%
got kids, bro. I've been around, man. You can't look at me and say it's equal. That's so. Just don't lie to me, dude. It doesn't work. I'm like, smell it.
How about this? I'll check it. We'll get
That's
back
cool.
to you.
Yeah, you can do that.
And we'll
Then
do a
see,
full
we're
report.
good. Now we're good. Now there's no factor. I'm good.
No, here's the thing.
They're not trying to look at me and tell me something that you don't know.
At the end of
as
the
if
day,
you know it.
At the end of the day, it doesn't even matter. Because look, what if I'm like, hey, I like flex fit. Oh, but the trucker had.
See, this is now he's trying to deflect. Change subject. We're not talking about that. We're talking about being truthful.
I want the
We're
flex
talking
fit.
about
I'm
being
getting the
truthful.
flex fit.
Cool.
Flex
Get
fit.
what you want. Tell me the truth. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I'll report back. How about that? Is that cool? Anyway, hoodies, like I said, women's stuff on there. If you want to represent while we are on the path, that's where you can get the stuff to represent.
You
Jocko
can
Store.
also get some Jocko white tea. You can get it from wherever. Yeah. It's because it tastes good and it's awesome for you. And it gives you an 8,000-pound deadlift, which is not, light.
Oh, something.
Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't yet. Otherwise, Echo is going to keep telling you to subscribe.
Yeah, man.
He's going to invade your dreams and tell you to subscribe.
Well,
and whoever you people are that haven't subscribed yet, you're crazy. Well, this is 168 podcasts. This is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of listening, but you didn't click subscribe. We got issues with you. So just subscribe. Don't forget about the Warrior Kid podcast. Trying to tee up a couple more right now to get them out there to all of you. So get some of that. And then also YouTube. We have a YouTube channel if you want to check that out. It's starring Echo's videos.
It's starring the video version of this podcast.
That's right. Well,
If you
and
wanna
who
see
made
what-
that?
Well, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, so it's starring Echo Charles's videos.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
So
it's true.
check out that.
You see what Jason Gardner looks like.
Yes.
So that's something.
You're definitely gonna want to see what Jason Gardner looks like.
No.
Do you think Jason? Okay, and people, please let me know. Does Jason Gardner look how he sounds?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
You think so?
Well, the thing is,
You already saw
I
me.
saw you and didn't hear you. So a lot of people in this
It's ruined.
sense,
Yeah,
is
people
going
will
to be
hear
the
you.
opposite.
I think you probably look how you sound. I think
think
but it's
so.
hard for me to make that judgment because I know you.
That is true.
I gotta find that picture. I'll post a picture of you and me, age whatever, 2019.
Yeah.
And
I
we
wanted
both
to
look
put
completely
yeah.
insane.
So you guys went in at the same time.
No, he went in a few years before.
A few years before, and then we ran over into each other
Yeah.
overseas and just really hit it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else? Psychological warfare.
Yes. What that is.
I
used to go into this all deep. He'd get mad every single time.
This is the one that broke me. This is the one where I was like, bro, we're not doing this whole support thing anymore. We're done doing it. Yeah. We're done. I'm not doing it ananymore. I'm not going to listen to you. It's not happening.
But here's the
I was
thing.
going to go Joe Rogan style and just record it afterwards by myself somewhere.
Right. Well,
you can just be quiet.
No, the proof is going to be in the pudding. Jason Gardner, you know what psychological warfare is?
It is.
Actually, you know what? It's not, because Jason Gardner's in the game, deep in the game.
Yeah.
So, for him to know what psychological warfare isn't
a big stretch.
It's not going to be very surprising. Yeah. So, for the people who don't know what it is, this is what it is. It's an album with tracks, Jocko tracks.
The thing you got to remember about this whole segment of us just sitting around and talking for the quote unquote supports, which it barely is, right? It's more just like just a session of, but it was because when we got done with some podcasts early on, it was like being drugged through like the emotional freaking hell. Yeah. And you get done and you don't want to just go home. Like you want to just like, okay, let's, it's like my youngest daughter. If she sees something scary or whatever, or, she'll say like, can we watch something funny? Yeah. And so that's what this actually is, hey, okay, we're going to talk about people getting killed, people getting blown up, people getting butchered.
Real people,
by the way. And when we get done with that, we're going to lighten it up a little bit so we can carry on. We're not going to forget about it, but we're going to have a little bit of levity towards the end. That's what this originally was. Somehow you ended up just saying the same thing over and over again.
Well, because I felt like I was getting good at saying it.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So, so what I did was I did lose sight of some things.
Yeah.
But we're back, and, I'm going to explain what psychological warfare is for the people who don't know. It's an album with tracks, Jocko tracks, talking about how you can overcome certain moments of weakness on the path. Boom. That's pretty concise, right?
Cool.
Boom.
Good
there
job.
It is. Next. On it. Onit.com. Okay, so On It. Good company. This is where I get kettlebells. Home gym? No home
you
gym yet?
You don't have a home gym yet?
No, I just moved.
Oh, yeah,
Getting ready to build it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
boom.
So, you don't have one right now.
Just got the rings, but...
Oh, rings. Boom.
Oh,
so
that's the original thing that you need to get.
Right.
That's the first thing you need to get.
Yep.
I didn't used to think that. I used to think it was a pull-up bar, but I changed my mind.
Rings.
Yeah, because more versatility.
Yeah, because rings
Ring
are
dips.
a pull-up bar.
Yes, they are, and they're also a dip bar, and they're also a ring push-up bar. That's a thing.
Oh yeah, big time. It's a thing. I got my rings from On It. Anyway, onit.com, you can get kettlebells, rings, battle ropes, those maces, those crazy maces. Do work out with that, man. You'll be in the game big time. Anyway, a lot of good stuff on there. Go there, onit.com/Jocko.
We got some books too. We got some books like Mikey and the Dragons, which, I think might be the best kids book ever written. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. I read this other one that was really good.
Oh, Way of the Warrior Kid.
Yes.
Mikey and the Dragons, check it out. It is going to help kids overcome fear. And it's an entertaining story. And it's got awesome drawings in it.
And it rhymes.
Yeah, I just shipped one out to my buddy on the East Coast, and he's got little ones. Mm-hmm. And he hit me up yesterday on text. He goes, bro, I just read that to my kids because 3 hours ahead of us. They loved it. That book is awesome. Thank you.
I have people that, this is odd, but I have people that, and I have people that say, I got a tears in my eyes when I was reading the letter to his son. Yeah. That can be kind of heavy, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when I made that original short video about it or whatever, I think I said this right. I showed it to my brother, and he's like, man, I'm kind of like tearing up. I don't know why. And we're watching the video, on the TV, and it's not like it's this super sad thing, but it's like, I guess it's like so like real, like these are things you kind of got to deal with, and now you got to take on this courage kind of thing, and it's like, I don't know, it's weird. Plus I have kids.
Son, man.
Yeah, funny.
So check out that. Check out the Warrior Kid books, Way the Warrior Kid, and and Mark's Mission. Somebody asked me. People sometimes ask questions that center around themselves. They're asking you a question, but so somebody asked me a question. It said 2 words. What is the theme of Way of the Warrior Kid?
Oh, in 2 words.
So that was the question. So now this person just wanted me to say, like, sum up this book in 2 words. And this was a mandate. It wasn't like, hey, man, could you kind of give me it was like 2 words.
Right.
So I was like, cool. You know what I said? It's actually really easy. What is the underlying theme of the Way of the Warrior Kid book series? The underlying theme is this. Warrior Kid.
There you go.
I'm like, there you go. It's like you want your kids to be warriors. What does that mean? Does that mean you want them to join the military and go fight? No, it means you want them to be warriors.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing, which actually gets explained in there.
Mm-hmm.
So
All out war, man.
That's the Warrior Kid books. Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. I've signed a lot of those for your people.
Yeah. And I bought like 10 of them and had you sign them to a bunch of guys and sent them out. They love them. It helps people out.
Yeah.
And then I've had guys in the last year lose somebody, like have someone in the family or friend die, and then I'm like, okay, go look at this page,
Yep.
where you describe how to deal with it.
Yeah, I actually had to use that page myself, and hopefully you don't have to use that page, but there's other things that go on in your life that can steer you off the path, and there's other pages in that book that will keep you on the path. Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. Extreme Ownership. Everything Jason was talking about, what we did at Trade Debt, everything that we tried to teach to the SEALs that were going to go overseas, it's in the book Extreme Ownership. It's in the book The Dichotomy of Leadership. They're both in there. You were showing me your notes the other day, Jason, from when I in-briefed your troop. It's like, oh, here's your notes. You sent me a little picture. What do they say? They say cover and move, simple, prioritize and execute, and decentralized command. That was, I don't know, 12 years ago or something like that. 10 years ago. Same word coming out. Same word. It hasn't changed. Learn those. Extreme Ownership and the Dichotomy of Leadership. Echelon Front, that is our leadership consultancy, where we solve problems through leadership. And every organization has problems, all kinds of problems. And every single one of those problems is a leadership problem. That's what's going to fix it, is fixing leadership. That's what we do. It's me. It's Leif Babin, JP Donnell, Dave Burke, Flynn Cochran, Mike Sorelli, Mike Baima, and does this make you a new guy? You're a new guy at Echelon Front, bro.
Yay.
And our latest member, I won't call him a new guy, because it really does matter. You went to Buds before me, right? So that's like a real thing. Like, I'm a new guy.
Yeah, apparently.
Nothing
I'd ever say.
Yeah. Anyways, our latest, Jason Gardner, who you've just listened to for 5 hours, is also on the team. And if you want help with your organization and your leadership inside your organization, go to echelonfront.com. Also, we have the Muster. The Muster is a leadership conference gathering.
Magical.
Yeah. It actually, it's just muster. It is a muster. That's what it is.
Right.
We're all going to get together. We talk about leadership, get granular, and delve into leadership from a lot of different angles. May 23rd and 24th in Chicago, September 19th and 20th in Denver, December 4th and 5th in Sydney. ExtremeOwnership.com. I haven't posted about this yet.
Just the muster in general.
I haven't posted at all. When I post, it's a lot of stuff. It sells. So if you want to go, all I'm saying is if you want to go, register now. Go to echelonfront.com. Actually, go to extremeownership.com, and that's where you can register to come to the muster in one of those locations. We will see you there. EF Online interactive leadership training. Starting to see the cool feedback from people on that. So EF Online, it is efonline.com. We have leadership training, courses, online, interactive. What else? What other verbs or adjectives to describe? Interactive, engaging.
Very engaging. What? Name your adventure. Wait.
Choose your own adventure. There's some choose your own adventure
Kinda
scenarios that you have to unfold.
Yeah.
And we're updating it and adding different content to it monthly. So it's going to continue to grow and educate both you and us as we all learn to become better leaders. If you want in on that.
I went through that, obviously, to make the video. And coincidentally, like a month, maybe a month and a half before, I went through an online training for CPR.
Okay.
So the online training for CPR, well, CPR, you got to do the physical thing too, for the certification, whatever. But there's an online training part of it. So, and not too bad. Not too bad, the online thing. I really went through it, kind of committed myself to it. Not as long or whatever, but, kind of. So I went through and I was like, cool, good. But there were tangible things that I'd be like, you could have done this a little bit more different to actually get the training, quote unquote training that someone, might need, whatever. So, a few months later, I go through the EF Online. And I'm thinking to myself, when I think back on the CPR, this is what they should have did with the CPR thing. Granted, the CPR one, you could tell was a lot older. It wasn't quite as contemporary, so I'm not really blaming them. But that's the way I really saw it. I was like, okay, this is good. This will give you like the training.
Yeah.
It'll allow you to make mistakes on an online training or do the wrong thing and then get corrected. Say, hey, you did this. Kind of.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that worried me, but. Because you remember the Navy course you'd take on something that was online?
Yep.
And it would be horrible and boring and everyone would just copy each other and just click through the things to get it done and you don't take anything away from it. That was my fear. How does this, if we don't do this right? But then as soon as I started looking at the technology and the things you could do and the way you could make it engaging, it's I don't want to say it's better, but if you're sitting at the muster and I say something, and you're like, wow, and you go to write that down, and then you hear me say this tail end of something else, and you missed it. You can't press rewind. You can't rewatch it. Yeah. You can't press pause and be like, that was a really good point. I know how I can apply that to my world and just write down how to handle something. You can't do that at the muster. Yeah. Online, let me rewatch that. Jocko and Leif just did a role play on dealing with someone in the office. Yeah. I actually need to deal with a person like that. How should I I'm going to watch that again. I'm going to see those little maneuvers take place. Yeah. So that's what we did. And we realized that we just don't have the reach for the demand that's out there for Echelon Front. We appreciate the demand and we want to satisfy the demand. So that is efonline.com if you want to get fully engaged in our leadership training. That's it. And of course we have EF Overwatch, where we're taking all these experienced leaders that have been in combat for the last couple decades, and as they move into the civilian sector, placing them into jobs where they can help lead organizations using the experience they have and their understanding of the principles that we talk about at Echelon Front in the book Extreme Ownership and on this podcast. Go to efoverwatch.com, where they're standing by waiting for you, by the way.
Take it.
And if you get done listening to this 3 hours of conversation and you want to continue it further, it wasn't enough. Yep. And you're not sure what to do, well, then that's cool, because you can actually get in touch with us and have little mini micro conversations with us on the interwebs, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Dash Facebook. Echo's at Echo Charles. I am at Jocko Willink, and Jason has multiple handles. Go.
Jason N. Gardner on Twitter. Jason.n.Gardner on Instagram, and Jason N. Gardner on Facebook.
You're going to have fun with Twitter. I'm just going to let you know. Cool. Because Twitter is the place for somebody with little one-liners to hang out and participate and throw one-liners out into the world and make people laugh or make people think. And it's just, it's pretty fun. Remember, you ever feel like the Terminator robot? You ever feel like that?
No.
I do sometimes. And one of the ways that I feel that is when I'm having a conversation with someone and I see little one-liners of what I could say. And sometimes, I mean, if I'm answering questions for a client, I'll be like, okay, here's, like as soon as they're asking me, I'm seeing little possible answers of how they fit in their world and does it make sense to them. And I've got all those, and then I just kind of choose one and go. And when I'm having, but I remember that in like when I was a school child, I was a little kid going to school, especially like around, what grade is 5th, 6th, and 7th grade? How old are you?
No.
4th
is
11,
9,
like 11, 12, 13, right?
Yes, 17.
It was like every single comment or statement that a school teacher made was just a prime setup to knock it out of the park with a one-liner from the back row. You know what I'm saying? I would just be sitting there going, oh, I would be so tempted I have to bite my tongue all day long as much as I could, because when you're 12 years old, you can only hold it in for so long before it just comes out. And then, so anyways, you're going to like Twitter because you can use your little one-liners, which you are very, very good at. And they're always, like I said, they're always very educational or humorous, or they at least make you think. So you'll have fun with that.
Yeah.
And don't feed the trolls. And don't feed the Russian bots.
No.
That's my new thing, bro.
Be careful. Don't click on anything.
Don't click on anything. Check. All right, Echo, anything else?
No.
Awesome. Jason.
Yeah, I'd like to thank my parents, Jim and Cookie Gardner, for all your unconditional love and support over the years. My sister Ari, who's a blue belt into jiu-jitsu.
How'd you get into jiu-jitsu?
What?
How'd you get into jiu-jitsu?
Listening to the podcast. Listening to the podcast, immediately found a jiu-jitsu place up there in San Clemente and started training. And then my brother Thaddeus, who's a tattoo artist, tattoos up in San Clemente at San Clemente Tattoo. If you're going to get some ink, go see him if you're local. And thanks to everybody else, and thanks to all the frogmen out there, past, present, and future. Get some.
Hell yeah. And we always thank everyone in uniform that protects us at home and abroad from the evil that we talked about today. And that includes, obviously, our military personnel, police and law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, correctional officers, border patrol, all the first responders. And also thanks to all of those that did serve and that have done their part as veterans for our great nation, like my brother here, Master Chief Jason Gardner. Thanks for your service. Thanks for coming on. And of course, I'm looking forward to another bunch of good years together. Thanks for everything, bro. And to everyone else that's listening, I'll go back to Beowulf. For every one of us living in this world means waiting for an end. Let whoever can win glory before death. So endure your troubles today. Bear up and be the man I expect you to be. That's how our ancestors lived, and that's how they died. So let us do the same. Arise, set forth, and get after it. And until next time, this is Jason Gardner and Echo and Jocko.